Thank you, Richmond. Good afternoon, our distinguished guests. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to, because of time, welcome us once again to the management session of the NAPE International Conference and Exhibition. I want to quickly just take us straight to the opening remarks for this session. We are paperless this time around, and we're encouraging all of us to just bear with us. Distinguished invitees, professional colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, I'm delighted to welcome you to the management session of our 38th Annual International Conference and Exhibition. The theme of this year's management session is the future of the oil and gas industry in a low oil price environment, the survival strategies. I would like to express my gratitude and deep appreciation to our keynote speakers from Shell and Total, and panelists for taking time off their very busy schedules to be here to share vast knowledge and experiences in the oil and gas industry and in so many areas. We're privileged to have such a rich panel bringing together We're privileged to have such a rich panel bringing together valuable experiences and insights from a broad spectrum of perspectives. I also want to thank the hardworking men and women in the planning committee which put this session together. It will interest you to know that the chairman of this subcom is based in the US, and you can imagine coordinating such a very important session from outside the country. Thank you for a job well done together with your team. The impact of low oil prices on the economy continues to remain a concern as nations emerge from lockdowns and attempts to jumpstart their economies were not left out. The adverse economic conditions occasioned by the COVID-19 pandemic has negatively impacted the demand and price of crude oil for most of 2020, and it will likely slip into 2021. The US benchmark crude oil price turned negative for the first time in history in April this year. While the market is slowly rebounding, it remains below the long-term average. This has come at a huge cost to the Nigerian economy, which is dependent on the oil and gas sector for most of government's revenue, and over 90% of total export earnings for Nigeria as a nation. What does this outlook portend for the future of the oil and gas industry and indeed the economy of the nation? I'm persuaded that with the quality of papers be to be presented and the discussions that will follow in this management session, the oil and gas industry and indeed the Nigerian economy will be the biggest winners. I therefore welcome you all to a session of enriching conversation, at the end of which I strongly believe veritable strategies for surviving the current low oil price regime will be delivered. Long live NAPE, long live the oil and gas industry, and long live the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Alex Nachitaka, President, Nigerian Association of Petroleum Explorationists and Fellow of our association. Welcoming us to this management session where we're looking at survival strategies to these low oil prices. I think at the opening ceremony, the Honorable Minister representing the Vice President told us that we're hoping that very soon all of this production cut would stop and that would drive up the price. But until that time, how do we survive? Our sponsors today who are leading the conversation of our survival strategies, of course, is SNEPCO and Total Nigeria. As we progress, we'll get to meet them one after the other. I'd like to begin our keynote address this afternoon from Total, as I'd like to welcome the Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer of Total E&P Nigeria, Mr. Mike Sangster, who is represented this afternoon by the Deputy Managing Director, Deep Water District of Total. Let's welcome Victor Bandele.
Thank you for measuring my height. All right. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. The President, the National Association of Petroleum Explorationists, NAPE, distinguished fellows of the association, gentlemen of the press, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I start with Total, and I say Total is always delighted to identify with the Nigerian Association of Petroleum Explorationists in the partnership of sustainable economic development of our dear country, Nigeria. Over the years, NAPE has made quality contributions from the annual conferences which have positively impacted our oil and gas industry, as well as the Nigerian economy. And so the theme of this management session, Future of Oil and Gas Industry in Low Oil Price Environment, Survival and Strategies, cannot be more appropriate, especially this time, the current global situation. We all agree that Nigeria must plan and exist with the current realities of low prices, and that it should optimize its opportunities and strengths to enhance its competitiveness. Nigeria will no doubt need to advance in the areas of innovations, strategies, and best practices in the following areas. So I start with technology. With the help of technology, the world is now able to access oil from domains previously unimaginable. And so, Mr. Deepwater in Total. And so we've gone several strides in finding oil. The result is an abundance of oil and gas resources around the world in different places, different environments. But I dare say that the challenge we have today is more of how to make the oil, the production of this oil, to be economic, to survive the present low prices. So this is a major challenge today. And we, as a nation, as Nigeria, we have to remain very competitive. Otherwise, the funds will go elsewhere. Point two, after technology, I say collaborating to drive down costs. Although we are all in business for profit, a situation that makes competition inevitable. For better cost efficiency, we need to explore ways of collaborations as partners with the same ultimate goal, to share projects and associated costs that will ordinarily overwhelm an individual player. And I say this not only to the IOCs, I say this to the independents, to everybody involved in this industry. It's the time to begin to look at partnership. If you don't, there is no one of us that can survive alone. This could be envisaged in areas such as rig clubs, seismic vessel sharing, just to mention a few, but we are all professionals and we know that there are plenty of opportunities where we can collaborate. An enabling policy is inevitable for success in this regard. So we are not, Total, Chevron, AGIP, all of us can begin to talk to one another, but there is still the part to be played by government to give us an enabling environment to be able to do all that in a way that overall it has a very positive impact on the country. Reduction in incidents of oil theft while boosting oil and gas production. We all know this. The industry has been going through this all over. And one of the main challenges facing on oil and gas companies' operations is that of pipeline vandalism and oil theft. We estimate large volumes of oil stolen in the oil producing areas across the country. Undoubtedly, some measures have been put in place to end the menace, but the more concerted effort would further minimize the independence or incidences and associated financial loss and ultimately help our industry to survive in these trying times. Every barrel that is taken out of what Nigeria should have earned money from is contributing negatively to our economy. So hence, the issues of security around installations and operating environments need to be stressed and addressed holistically. I go to the fourth point, which maybe could be the most important. It's a win-win PIB. I start by saying that Total, my company, is keen to continue to invest in Nigeria and is willing to contribute constructively to the ongoing debate on the petroleum industry bill. Permit me to contextualize Nigeria's situation. Nigeria has only benefited from less than 5% of all investment in oil and gas in Africa between 2015 and 2019. This is a fact. We're the giant of Africa. We have the highest resource of Africa, but the investment that have come to Nigeria in the last 6 years or 5 years has been 5% of what had been put into Africa. This is to say that the 3 billion invested in Nigerian projects which took final investment decisions between 2015 and 2019 accounts for 5%. So when we say it's $3 billion, it appears to be big, but I dare say that that $3 billion is a far cry from the amount of funds that have been spent in Africa. So no major investment decision was taken in deepwater Nigeria between 2015 and 2019. It's a fact, it's on the table. Despite a number of available potential viable projects, and almost all the companies have 1 or 2 projects that are in the pipeline that they've been working on that have been discovered. So it's not a matter of discovery. It's not a matter of resources being there. Resources are there, been discovered, but we've not developed in the last 5 years. The fiscal terms and increasing costs are the major drivers of this decision that is not making us to go forward. And most of the leases are also getting to expiry. So the question is, what happens after my license expires? What am I going to do? And where will I find myself based on the fiscal terms that we have on ground? We welcome the efforts being made by the authorities to define a long-term framework for the oil and gas industry that provides clarity and certainty as well as attractive terms which translate to a win-win solution for the country and investors. So the ongoing PIB can actually be a win-win. It can be a driver for us going forward. So a progressive win-win PIB will no doubt be the catalyst needed for a new wave of hydrocarbon exploration and development. And mark me, I more or less emphasize the development. The exploration will come naturally when we are able to develop resources. Diversification and pursuit of new energies. Even before this period of heightened concerns about the COVID-19, which has brought about a reduction in global demand, firms and countries eager to reduce their carbon footprints had been out with strategies and an evolving energy mix and the shift towards cleaner energy. We all know that the world over had been crying for cleaner energy, and all the companies have been targeting this. So there has been an internal drive in each of the companies, and I think our country, Nigeria, benefits the highest from this. This is one country where you've had a lot of flaring, a lot of misuse of our resources. And the drive that the companies have to date, I think in the last 3 years has been enormous to reduce the carbon footprint in our operations. The challenge for companies like Total is to strike the right balance between enabling the energy transition by investing in new energies such as solar and wind power, while continuing to provide oil and gas to meet the needs of our customers and society. Consequently, in order to respond to the current global crisis, we need to manage through the uncertainties and seize the identified opportunities. The overarching message here is, let's develop Nigeria's abundant resources now. Let's develop it now. Time waits for nobody before it's too late. I don't know what the energy mix will be in the next 15 years, in the next 10 years. But we need the resources that we have now, we really need to bring them to fruition as quickly as possible. Total is part of the solution to climate change with a commitment to delivering reliable, affordable, and clean energy to the population. We have made important investments locally in this area and implemented several initiatives that are already impacting the Nigerian energy landscape positively. I'll mention just a few. Over 1.5 million Nigerians have been impacted from the sale of 400,000 Total solar lamps since 2013. So Total has a solar lamp that we make available to people, and 400,000 have been sold since 2013. Worldwide, 10 million people have been impacted. We can do the arithmetic. So 400,000 in Nigeria and 10 million people worldwide. Out of 577, I keep that figure in mind, 577 service stations across the country, more than 77 have been solarized as at the end of January 2020. And we're moving, it's a wave. So we're going almost all our service stations, and we have the largest in Nigeria. When I say 577, we don't have competition in that area. We have also deployed over 150 residential solar solutions across the country. We're taking this one as a stride, and so Total has a solution, and very soon it will be extremely commercial, where people will just connect their buildings 100% in solar. Our investment in LLNG from the beginning till now is partly derived from our commitment to the production of cleaner and better energy. Of course, we are suppliers to LLNG, as you may know, and all the gas that we supply to LLNG, before now, all those gas will have been flagged. At the Total Group level, our ambition is to become the responsible highlighted energy major and to get the net zero carbon emissions to zero by 2050. In order to achieve this objective, we have identified some key initiatives like promoting the use of natural gas, biogas, and hydrogen, investing in low-cost oil and biofuels, investing in low-carbon electricity, mainly from renewables, investing in carbon sinks that are essential to achieving carbon neutrality, either nature-based solutions or carbon capture. We would like to emphasize that Total continues to hold faith in Nigeria. It is the same spirit that saw the company make the investment that led to the development of the 200,000 barrels per day Egina field, with first oil in December 2018, at a time the investment climate was not the most appealing. I think Egina has been fully published. I think everybody at this conference have had Egina because it's really the main thing that has happened in the industry in the last 8 to 10 years. The Ikike development project is currently in progress by Total, with the drilling of development wells commencing in 2021. So it's a baby project compared to Egina, but it's substantial. It's shallow offshore, and it's a project that is very dear to my heart. I was involved in it from the start. Nigeria is crucial to Total Group, accounting for around 10% of its energy production. Keep that figure in mind also. So we say that Total is a major in Nigeria, one of the biggest. And 10% of the group Total is here in Nigeria. 10% of Total Group is here in Nigeria. I think it's a big message. Our faith, in fact, let me talk about investment a bit. Total has invested $10 billion in the country from 2013 to date. We have also taken steps to drive down our greenhouse gas emissions, pursuing a zero flare principle on all our new projects. And when I say new projects, I mean there is no project that has been sanctioned since 2013 in Total that is not zero flare compliant. There's none. I mentioned Egina. There's no routine flaring on Egina. There's no routine flaring on Ofon. In fact, with the development of Ofon, we arrested significantly all the flare that happens in our OML 102 and OML 99. Our faith in the country has also seen us maintain an annual CSR spend of over $40 million, annual $40 million in CSR. We maintain at least 19 MOUs with our host communities. The MOUs facilitate a seamless delivery of sustainable development to our host communities. As we did in 2019, we just rounded off the commissioning of 14 legacy projects across the country, and we are going to do more. This is aside for thousands of student scholarships and skill acquisition programs that we maintain annually. The inaugurated projects include mammography centers, maternity and child referral centers, science lab theaters, women development centers, amongst others. We had to take up the challenge of virtually inaugurating the projects which became more relevant in the wake of COVID-19 pandemic. In fact, our contribution to COVID-19 was made easier because of the investments that we have done in the past. It helped a lot. We are confident that oil and gas will remain important resources that can launch Nigeria to the level it deserves to be. This is my personal conviction, and as a major stakeholder, I think my company stands for this also. When properly harnessed and with the right investments, as the country seeks to build and make every industry contribution to the economic sustainable, this conference, this particular conference, is one of the main avenues it looks to for ideas. It is my expectation, and the expectation of Total, that this conference will come up with ideas and implementable decisions that can guide both industry and government in repositioning Nigeria's oil and gas industry for sustainability. Sustainability in production, sustainability in growth, and sustainability even in social perspective. It is a great gift that we can give to the country to celebrate the Diamond Anniversary. Thank you for your attention. I wish you a very successful deliberation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Victor Bandele, Deputy Managing Director, Deepwater for Total, representing his Chief Executive and giving us what they are doing at Total and what we need to do as a people to survive these very difficult times that we find ourselves in terms of the price of crude globally. Please, one more time, let's give him a round of applause. Thank you very much, sir. I was particularly taken aback by the fact that about 5% or less than 5% of the total spend in the industry in the continent came to Nigeria. Wow. And I would think that we've developed enough capacity through the years by virtue of our independence and our indigenous service companies, enough capacity to go out of Africa and expand our dragnet to bring in some sort of FDI, if you like, coming from outside of Nigeria. Thank you very much for that insight. We're switching gears now immediately, and we're going over to our next keynote speaker. We're going over to our next keynote speaker, and this time he is the Managing Director of Shell Nigeria E&P Company, known as SNEPCO. He's joining us virtually via Zoom. I'd like to yield this virtual platform now to Mr. Bayo Ojulari. Sir, if you can hear me, the virtual stage is yours.
Richmond, please confirm you can hear me.
I would say that Mr. Bandele is in the running for the President's Award. Let's see if you can overtake, sir.
Please, can you hear me, Richmond?
Loud and clear, Mr. Ojulari.
Yes, it looks like my video is muted. Can someone unmute my video, please?
Please allow Oga to give him access to put on and off his video, please. Okay, while we're doing that, I just told you, I don't know if you heard that, Mr. Bandele is in the running for the President's Award. I'm hoping you will overtake him, sir. Time management, sir.
Okay. I'll try.
All right, sir. Over to you, sir. Is his video on now? Does he have to do it himself? Okay, okay. The right to...
okay, still tell me you cannot start your video because Richmond, please confirm you can still hear me.
Be muted. Can somebody unmute him?
Okay, something seems to be working now. It looks like it's working, Richmond. Please confirm. Richmond, please confirm you can hear me.
Bayo, I confirm I can hear you. This is Chike Zemosu.
Okay, Chike, thank you very much. So I can proceed then?
Yes, continue.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. And thank you once again for the privilege to be part of this NAPE conference. Please permit me, in view of time, to start on all existing protocol and once again congratulate NAPE. And let me start by recognizing my own dual role at this 2020 NAPE opening conference. First, I bring greetings from Shell, a dependable ally of NAPE and a major sponsor of the 2020 NIA. We've had an age-long relationship with NAPE at the corporate and individual members levels, all in a bid to support our industry and make Nigeria an attractive investment destination, while producing some of the best professionals that we all export to even many other countries and across our country. Shell companies in Nigeria have always been in the forefront of this focus on developing Nigerians and Nigerian businesses to compete confidently in the global community of E&P countries. And I must say, I'm proud of where Nigeria sits in the Committee of Nations, particularly when you also look at the role that the industry have played. Having said that, let me switch to my other role as the keynote speaker for the 2020 NAPE event, where I'll be looking at the confidence around the future of oil and gas industry in a low oil price, the survival strategies. And if you go to the next slide, please. I intend to do this. The disclaimer is there. These slides are not to underpin any investments or any FIDs. Please go to the next slide. So I'll just try and be brief around these four headlines. A bit of the global context. We've heard a lot since yesterday and today as well. Some Nigerian context, and talk about the strategies for survival, but are also at thriving, because we need to go beyond survival. We have to thrive, because there are significant opportunities to actually take advantage of the situation with the resources and the capabilities that we have to thrive. And I will summarize. Next slide, please. So once upon a time, the oil and gas industry ruled the world, but that is changing fast. And so must the players, all of us participating in this conference and the rest of us who are not here, in order to remain appealing to investors. The top 5 players in the technology industry have since overtaken the oil and gas majors in terms of market capitalization, apart from Saudi Arabia Oil Company. The plots I have for you on the right is just to give you a bit of a simple time lapse from 2009 to 2015 and 2020. And the picture there is just to give you, not drawn to scale, but you see that as at 2009, the oil industry was still higher in market capitalization. By 2015, the technology industry has taken over. And by 2020, they've even grown further. Now, the only reason you still see that the oil and gas bubble in terms of market capitalization is still significant is actually because of one country. Only one company is responsible for 74% of the oil and gas market capitalization as at June 2020. If you remove Saudi Arabia Oil Company, that bubble will be very, very small. And this is to talk to the evolution, the evolvement, the speed at which, and I'll come back to that, at which we adapt with the intellect we have, the knowledge we have, the resources we have. You wonder, can we not adapt faster? Should this picture be really true? Next slide, please. I know a lot has been said in the pre-conference workshops as well as during this conference about the oil price. But the reason I play this chart back to us is just the volatility. As of now, there's a prediction that we'll be getting to the $55 a barrel into next year, but no one can take a bet on that. Quite a number of things can change. And how do we stay resilient? So, oil demand for 2021 downgraded now due to surge in COVID-19 cases in Europe and stalled recovery in North America. There is a hope that the vaccine could come, but who knows how that will play out. There are discussions that OPEC cut might improve, but again, the global dynamics makes that difficult to predict and make that difficult to bank. We also know that the US Gulf of Mexico supply impacted by hurricane in October. China gives us a glimpse of hope in terms of some of its growth. And what I'll say is that 2022 supply and demand balance tightens, hopefully, in terms of prediction. But what you need to keep in mind is that big question mark. Next slide, please. Now let's come home to Nigeria, and some of it will be just a reflection on some of the discussion we've had again yesterday and this morning, and the last presentation from my colleague from Total. The industry in Nigeria still remains a major driver of the economy, but has been seriously challenged this year with production cuts, reduction in price, and direct impact on the economy. If you look at the left, what I tried to depict there was what was the budget premise for 2020 by the Nigerian government. It was premised on the 56% non-oil sources and 44% oil sources, 2020 budget. The current realities is what I show on the right. You see what happened in terms of reduction of the projected production by 36%. Benchmark price was 57. Reality is looking at average around 28, plus or minus. Let's not also forget the exchange rate. I've put in the official picture here, but we all know what the black market says. Reduction in projected revenue by 30%, an increase in budget deficit by 56%. That is the context, or some of the context, for which this conference is predicated on. These are the challenges of our time and our country. Next slide, please. I'd like to start with Shell, and I'll start with survival strategies. And this is just an example for us. What we're doing, every company will tell you what they're doing, every parastatals, from banking industry to oil and gas industries, everybody has responded. But this is to give you a sense of how we're responding with the survival. We reacted globally to the current situation through what we call the 3 C's: care, continuity, and cash. We recognize that this is a peculiar situation, and we are taking drastic measures to manage it without compromising on HSE, ethics, and compliance. Under care, we have to put in a very solid COVID response protocol for all our activities, particularly frontline activities where we have asset producing oil and gas, where we're having drilling activities or our projects out there. And those are not just for short-term responses. They have now been solidified, and we continue to improve them on a monthly basis to lead us into the future. So we feel confident that we have combination of controls that allow us to maintain operations. It was also important that we needed to demonstrate care and put, again, visible and credible support to staff, contractor staff, our own staff, the communities where we operate, and the government where we operate in, to ensure that we support that integrated care for people. The second part is continuity. We had to prioritize on core production operations and deprioritize non-core production operations in the short term in order to survive. We stretched the limit of our IT capability, and we looked at digital technology. Most of us have heard a lot and conversations around digital. All of these to increase our efficiency and reduce cost. Most importantly, what I found most inspiring for me is how we are now unleashing the talent of our people through multi-skilling. You just suddenly realize that most of the resources we have can do more than one or two or three things, such that in locations and in areas with minimum manning, we're able to do a lot more. This requires some investment, but once you get that investment in place, start to benefit. The third arm of our survival strategy is cash. Cash is king. We launched a major transformational reshape organization to look at the overall way we work across the globe, including Nigeria, relooking at our portfolio structure, our portfolio segmentation. What are those things that we needed to focus on and do with a low-cost mindset? And what are those items that we need to look at and still maintain a heavy resourcing capability? We started to look at strategic cost leadership measures that allow us not just to save costs in 2020, but initiatives and game changers that allow us to sustain that cost leadership into the next 5 years. Most of us who have been watching the global shale know that since the Second World War, this year, dividends were suspended, cut, and share buyback was also suspended, just to survive. And most importantly, as we've heard as well, we now have a very clear roadmap that is leading us into the energy transition. So these are the survival initiatives around care for people, business continuity, and generating the cash that you need to actually survive. Next slide, please. Now, you recall in my agenda slide, I said, when I reflected on the topic, I started to challenge myself to say, is survival enough? I think the survival might just be something that feels limiting. We need to thrive. And what do we need to thrive? A lot has been said around cost optimization. A lot has been said around digital and technology. And a lot has been said around collaboration. Several people have talked about the contract renegotiation to ensure win-win for contractor and operator, to be sure we all remain in business. Benchmarking in and out of country to ensure we're competitive. Deferral of non-critical spends. And unlocking the value from gas through synergies, end to end. The gas has to be looked at in an integrated manner. I know a lot has been said around gas, but how do we do it in a cost-effective manner and stay in the leadership? In terms of virtual tech and technology, quite a lot there around leveraging virtual technologies, leveraging other digital solutions that allows us to reduce costs. But one that is very, very dear to my heart as well is one of our FPSO, Bonga, which is the first deepwater FPSO in Nigeria. We're the first in the world to build what we call the digital twin, which means somebody sitting anywhere in the world has a replica of a digital replication of that FPSO. So you don't need to fly to offshore to go and do inspection before you design work or you plan work or you plan intervention or maintenance. We're currently using quite a number of robotic technologies to do inspection, both on the FPSO and also subsea, and hence reducing HSC exposure, but also helping us during this pandemic, and we will lead that going forward. And some remedial action. Also important is that leveraging digital technology, we were dependent on OEMs who have specialist equipment that are on our facilities. We've now been able to build local capacity in those areas, and by collaborating virtually, these local capacity are able to do major maintenance on major equipment on site without having us flying people in country and out of and off to offshore. A lot has been said around collaboration, and I've heard is just to reinforce around the logistics, the industry-wide supplies, but also collaboration in terms of standardization and replication so that we can design one and implement many. Next slide, please. The next slide just continues the debate and the conversations around moving from survival to thriving. Government policies, a lot has been said around the PIB, most importantly around providing stability as well as a win-win. The uncertainty around the fiscal environment is one of the major reasons why investment in Nigeria and FIDs, major parts of Nigeria, has not really happened recently. I think, again, my colleagues from Total said it very aptly. That 5% is a result of long uncertainties, aside from just the content. So people are not sure what's going to happen, and everybody is hesitating. It's very important to incentives for the players in the sector to go after idle treasures and underpinned by a win-win disposition. Sanctity and security of contract still remains a concern for investors. And as much as we talk about doing something about it in Nigeria, great. But the taste of the pudding is in the eating. People who want to invest want to see it. They don't want to hear about it. I think a lot about hearing about it. People want to actually see it in action before they will commit their hard-earned money into our country on a larger scale. International and indigenous companies need to do a lot. We've talked about a lot that they can do in terms of digitalization, a lot they can do in terms of collaboration, improving efficiencies, leveraging their global connect and best practices to drive efficiencies and low cost. Our financiers and lenders have a big role to play, and there's nothing we can do without the service companies who provide supplies for us across board. At the bottom, I just put some 3 keywords around my reflections around thriving. To thrive, we need agility. Be prepared, ready, and positioned to respond to shocks, upsets, and roller coaster. Dynamism, being nimble in our strategies and plans to remain afloat in the face of the worst turbulence that we may see. And we need foresight, looking beyond the clouds, long-term vision, recognizing that the tides can never be still or friendly. And all of this needs to be done in a very speedy manner. Next slide, please. This is my last slide, and I think just some reminders. Despite the challenges facing the industry, there are still opportunities for us to rewrite the story, surpass the industry ambitions of $10 per barrel unit operating cost, and remain competitive. These are just my reflections based on what I've shared with you very quickly. Globally, other industries are challenging the oil and gas industry, especially the technology industry, making competition for funds tougher. The industry must innovate. We must innovate. We in Nigeria must innovate. We must consolidate. We must tap into our collective strengths for us to move forward. The other thing I'd like to say here, and if there's one word that you would take from my note, is speed. Policies, discussions, a lot of things that we talk about. We're just too slow in moving from talk to action. If we're going to compete and if our industry is going to be relevant in Nigeria, we need to move with speed. We need to convert the debates into concrete opportunities, maturing opportunities, developing opportunities, delivering those projects. That's where it counts. And for me, that's one of the things that I keep reflecting on. Why does it take us so long to get things done? The low oil price environment has significant impact on the global economy and hence the Nigerian economy. It's going to be survival of the fittest. I've shared with you that we in Shell are focused on these 3 C's in terms of surviving: care, continuity, and cash. I've also shared with you some of the stuff we're doing around digital technology solution, reshaping the organization, and pursuing alternative energy solution while collaborating with investors and key stakeholders. One point I'd like to make here is around the energy transition, the alternative energy. For those who may not be aware that the Shell Energy Nigeria is coming to birth, building on the leadership that Shell has in local gas distribution with SNG, the Shell Nigerian Gas, where we deliver gas to industrial areas in Aba, Ota, and other parts of the country. Building on what Olon has been doing in building Nigerians' capacity, communities' capacity to invest in alternative energy and sustain it. So this issue around alternative energy is real. But one point we need to keep in mind, for Nigeria to lead in alternative energy solution, we need the oil and gas industry because that is where the funding is going to come from. So that future that everybody is looking to, if we in the oil and gas industry do not get on with speed to implement all the great ideas that we have, we'll be left behind. Last but not the least is rewriting the story is a collective effort requiring unwavering commitment and transparency of integrated plans and performance against the plan from all players. This is important. We say a lot of things, but we hardly hold ourselves accountable or even put a picture on top of us to say, what did we say last year? How much of we have we done? Where have we not covered the things we plan to do? What do we need to make it better? How do we move forward? We need to begin to make transparent what the plans are, what the performance are, so that we can sincerely improve both in the industry, which will have a ripple effect on the wider economy. That's where I'll leave it. Thank you very much for listening. And back to you, Richmond.
I just switch gears immediately. I want to make a special appeal now. Moving forward, those of our distinguished speakers online, whenever you see the video feed move from you to me, I'm saying time up. Those who are in the room, when I'm by my staircase, I'm saying time up. That will be our means of communication, right? So please, let's keep the time. I understand it is difficult to speak within 15 minutes, given all that you intend to marshal out. I appreciate that. But please, let's very kindly keep the time. Now, because I'm told that Mr. Bandele and Mr. Ojulari may excuse themselves anytime from now, if you have any, I have looked through the conversations on the webinar. I didn't see any question for either of them from the online. I don't know if there's a question in-house for any of the two of them before I move on to the next speakers, because I'm told the other questions for the next speaker after now, till the very last one before the panel. All of your questions all of your questions for them will be taken during the panel that'll be moderated by one of our fellows, Mr. Sayende. So just for the two of them, if there are no questions, we make progress. Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, so continuing now, we're switching gears to the next speaker. The next speaker is equally joining us via the webinar link. He is online. I've heard his voice earlier. He's currently leading the team of a Nigerian independent that is gone from just an EMP company to a very holistic energy company, and continues to transform not just herself as a company, but the vicinity where they do business. I talk of one of Nigeria's biggest pride at the moment, as long as this industry is concerned, Walter Smith Petroleum Oil Limited, whose managing director is joining us live via Zoom. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Mr. Chikezie Nwosu.
Okay, thank you very much, Richmond. I'm checking that I can be heard very clearly.
Loud and clear, sir.
Very good. So I'll then proceed and try to honor your 15 minutes. Okay, so basically, I'll be speaking on the same topic, future of oil and gas industry in a low oil price environment, survival strategies from our own perspective. So next slide. I cannot see the slides. Hello? Can I still be heard?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me, sir?
I can hear you.
Okay, brilliant. Please, can you share your screen yourself? Give him a bunch. I'm told that they don't have your slide. My apologies. They say you didn't send it or something, but please.
I sent the slides on Friday to Lawrence, and I also reminded them.
Okay, brilliant.
This morning.
My most sincere apologies, sir.
Well,
if you share your screen now, just go ahead, sir.
I can't share the slides because I'm using my phone, and so I have to log off and use my laptop to do that. So that will take some time.
Okay.
So can you go to the next speaker while I try to sort that out?
Brilliant idea. Brilliant idea.
Okay.
Brilliant idea. Thank you, sir.
All right.
All right. Thank you. No, he would sort it out with them now, and once it's ready, would take him. So Tunde, DK, or Julius, you people get in touch with Mr. Nwosu, get the slides and sort it out, please. Thank you very much. Okay, so we're switching gears now to our next speaker, who is the senior partner at KPMG in Nigeria and the chairman of KPMG Africa. He's also joining us live via the webinar platform, Mr. Kunle Elebute. Mr. Elebute, did you make the call?
Yeah, how are you doing? Can you hear me very well?
Loud and clear, Mr. Elebute. Good afternoon.
Absolutely. Good afternoon. How are you doing? Thank you. Thank you for having me. Yeah, I believe your colleagues have my slides, and they're going to show the slides and move them for me.
Mr. Elebute, can you share your slide?
No, I sent my slides also to your colleague.
I know. Can you share it? Are you using your laptop? Can you share a slide?
No, I'm using my laptop, but I didn't plan to share it. No.
Oh, okay.
Okay, but I'm back on. I'm back on with my laptop, and I can share my slides now.
Oh, brilliant. So, Elebute, just give me. Let's take Mr. Nwosu, and then hopefully it would sort it out before we get to your presentations. But for now, thank you, Mr. Elebute, and let's switch back to Mr. Nwosu. Mr. Nwosu, sir, you can share your slide. The floor is yours.
Okay, the host has asked you to start your video. Yes.
Can you give him the opportunity?
The host has disabled my screen sharing.
Allow him to share his screen, please. For those of you joining us online and in the room, please, let's bear with our technical team. The hybrid conference thing is their first outing. We'll get better. We're good. So you can share your screen now. You can unmute your video and your audio. Confirm you can do that, sir.
Yes, I can. And I'm now sharing my screen. Can you all see my screen?
Yes, I guess this is you.
Yes, it is.
I can see your screen, sir.
Okay. So I can then proceed, right? You can hear me well.
By all means, sir. Yes, sir.
All right. Okay, so I said, the topic is, again, the same, and I'm going to try and do it justice from my own perspective, and then conclude with, a little bit of comments around what Walter Smith is doing in this space. So it's the future of oil and gas industry in a low oil price environment, survival strategies. Okay. So the outline of my presentation will be as follows. I'll talk quickly about the historical perspectives on oil and gas prices and the impact on global health, because of course, there's a connection between the price of these commodities and what we need to do internally in terms of making sure that we can survive, because there is always a turbulence in these oil prices. It's not anything new. Second part is how the oil and gas industry has typically reacted. So let's take a look at a little bit about history about our reactions. And then, the challenge of high oil cost countries, because Nigeria is one of those countries. Then I'll talk about some of the cost drivers in the Nigerian oil and gas industry. I kind of touched a little bit on this when I was talking at the pre-conference workshop yesterday, but I'll dive in a little bit more. And then what these survival strategies are. And I will focus on the typical things that Walter Smith is doing, which are around technology adaptation and collaboration. So the next slide, if you can see, talks about the world's historical crude oil prices and key world events. So clearly, it's not anything within the control of any one company or even any one country. Even though you hear about OPEC and OPEC++, Saudi Arabia and Russia, it is limited, the extent to which they can impact some of these when they are major world events. Now, COVID-19 was, of course, a major pandemic, a major world event. And whatever has been done in terms of creating the right balance between demand and supply, where, of course, the OPEC++ cuts have helped to recover oil prices. But that's because, in addition to what they've done, there's been a much better understanding of the COVID-19 pandemic. And therefore, there's a little more confidence that the economies and markets will recover. If there wasn't that part of it, irrespective of what was being done, you would not see such a significant rebound, because it was actually a significant rebound coming from the lows of, $10 to $13 per barrel. And in some cases, people paying people to come and take their crude because of the tank top situations, and where it is now at over $40 a barrel. Now, this oil price volatility, we now focus into the last 2 decades. The last one we actually saw was oil price crash in 2014, prior to this COVID-19 crisis. I can take a look and see that this is a volatile thing. Yeah, it's not something that you can predict with any amount of regularity. I actually have a joke with friends of mine. I say that people who want to predict things like the stock market or the oil prices, based on their models of demand and supply, may just as well call a small child, give him a chalk, and ask him to draw anything. Not that crazy, but it's actually very difficult to predict this thing. So you hear U-shaped recoveries, V-shaped recoveries, K-shaped recoveries, whatever you see. Now, the point I'm trying to make is that because this is typically outside our control, it's important to manage the things that are within our control as survival strategies. So when you're in a market where the actual commodity prices are outside your control, then your strategic survival will be dependent on what you can control, which is typically around increasing production and reducing costs. So if you take a look at the lower part of those charts, it shows other commodities that have been affected during this COVID pandemic. And you can see that, all of them, with the exception maybe of gold, silver, lead, copper, aluminum, coffee, wheat, sugar, all affected. But look at the Brent oil price at the time that COVID happened. So there was a major issue that we had to deal with. Now, in terms of what this means for, global growth forecasts. Now, the next slide, it hasn't updated with the next slide. I hope it will. But there's been a global slowdown. And there are multi-year lows that we see that are correlatable with the oil demand growth, which also again correlates very well with demand supply with oil prices. 1980, about 1993, 94, 2009, a little bit in 2014, and of course, coming into the COVID pandemic in 2020. And there have been numerous downgrades on growth forecasts in 2020. Things are getting to look a little more positive when you start looking at 2021 because of the positive news that we're hearing about vaccines and the fact that we're getting to understand this COVID-19 pandemic. But what I'm trying to show is that it's not a recent occurrence. It's something that has happened over history. And so what we've tended to do was basically to, find a means of addressing it at that time and then going back into very bad behaviors at a much later time. So what we need to do is the discipline to change those behaviors now because it is critical for survival. And then going forward, even if the oil prices go up, it is critical to continue to maintain some control over all these strategic parameters. Now again, gas prices kind of stay stable most of the time, but during this COVID pandemic, not quite so. Maybe the Henry Hub prices, as shown over there, stayed kind of stable, but there were a number of places. JKM, KM LNG went down, Brent RHS, MPP. So a lot of impact also happened with gas prices. And the reason why I say this is that there's always this question of the fact that, oh, okay, even if I have an oil and gas business, even if oil prices go down, gas prices will remain stable. Maybe not. We'll try and keep watching this space about what happened and this kind of incidents and see whether or not there is also a need, and I think there is, to consecutively think about strategic survival for gas and for oil as well. Yeah? Okay, the next slide shows that, it just reminds us about 2014. We've been here recently. Brent and West Texas Intermediate crude oil prices crashed in 2014. We're aware of that. And these were a little bit of the industry responses then in 2014. And, a couple of areas, and I'm looking at operations, strategic focus, and capital structure. So in operations, large CapEx spending was deferred until the price outlook improved and programs became bankable. Service companies, of course, bore the brunt of this because, whenever this happens, the E&P companies go to service companies and they say to them, we want to renegotiate down the cost of your services, those contracts. In actual fact, there was a mandate around them for all the E&P companies to go and ask for the service companies to reduce the cost of their services by, I think it was 70% was the guideline from NAPEX. But we did manage to, in many cases, in the company I was then, reduce those costs by about 30%. But again, these are also part of the oil and gas industry, and we shouldn't necessarily be making them take the brunt of, this kind of, issues. We should find a collaborative way where they don't go out of business because we are trying to save ourselves from going out of business. Operators no longer had buffers. The buffer that you had at $100 per barrel vanished in 2014 and has basically vanished again now. In terms of strategic focus, many players took on a new focus, resource diversification. There was a lot of discussion going to gas content in asset portfolios. That worked for a number of companies, and I think, kudos to Seplat, who managed to use that to shore up, their asset portfolio at that time. Gas prices have a certain degree of resilience, as we've seen already, to oil price fluctuations. Watch that space. It may not be the same going forward. As we get more and more into utilization of gas, we might start having these kind of challenges of supply and demand as well. Now, most players within the industry also underwent a portfolio review and subsequently rationalized their programs. Now, the funny thing about some of these things are these were short gap measures for survival. And I'm looking more at what people need to do with respect to longer term survival, tactics or strategies. In terms of capital structure, debt reduction was a key focus for many independents, as low operating performance left them highly levered. Borrowing was a lot more difficult, and hedging started playing a much more important role in making sure that these companies could survive. Now, I go beyond that. So I just said the historical perspective. So I can now start discussing about what the problem with Nigeria is. The cost of oil production, when you look at the averages across board, we normally talk about Saudi Arabia, but we are within OPEC. And in OPEC, we're one of the higher cost oil producing countries. And this is sad because we have significant experience from which the rest of Africa can borrow from, and yet we have not managed to bring down this cost of oil production. In terms of operating cost per barrel across countries, take a look at where Nigeria sits. And this data was shared yesterday again and reconfirmed from the data that the GGM Nappings has. Basically, when you see these averages that looks around $20 per barrel, a lot of Nigerian companies are at the higher end of this. And basically, we're looking at costs that sometimes go as high as, if not above $30 a barrel. We've seen that in practice within the country. Right? So this is not a good place to be in terms of high cost producers. Now, and the key thing is that those high cost producers are the risk of shutdown when the oil price comes down. And when you shut down, you don't survive, you're done with. And here is CNN Money about the difference between the capital expenditure per barrel versus the operating expenditure per barrel. Again, Nigeria is there at the top end of things, around $16, $17 per barrel in terms of capital expenditure average, and about $15 per barrel in terms of operating expenditure average. I say average because there are some cases where those numbers are much higher. Now, why is it also important to take a look at the next slide? Because this is about terrain. Because when we look across terrain in Nigeria, we notice the same thing that happens globally as well. But in every single terrain we take a look at, Nigeria is always at the high end, whether you're looking at onshore, offshore, wherever it is, we keep staying, or deep water, we seem to be operating at the high end of these cost of crude production. And it's not a good thing, as I'll continue to reiterate. Now, I've taken a look, and this is work that I did on my own because I've had the opportunities to work in different companies and take on this data. But the data behind this is not to be shared. What are the major OPEX cost drivers in Nigeria? And I was surprisingly pleased when I saw GGM Nappings present this at the pre-conference workshop yesterday, and the numbers were quite similar. G&A costs take up about 41%. His numbers were about 39%. My average numbers from my analysis is about 41%. Regulatory and statutory, we keep making noise about all the statutory costs and everything, but these are about 10%. They're high. That doesn't mean we shouldn't consistently try and bring them lower. But the ones that are directly under our control, not having to go to any government agencies, G&A costs, we should try and do something about. Crude handling charges, another major concern in terms of that driving up the OPEX cost in Nigeria. Crude handling charges, the reserve production charges, they are significantly high, and all the other terminal charges and all those things, in addition to having to have technology and regulations that allow us to dewater this oil before we put them into the pipelines. Because you're paying for all the barrels you put into the pipelines, whether you have, you put water inside there or you put oil there. The reserve production charge is actually about produced barrels. And yet what you're actually selling is not the water, but the oil. And then last of all is the direct operations cost as well, which again, we need to do something about getting a handle of that. Now, put on top of all that, in terms of the normal way of operating, other issues around crude theft and deferments. And depending on where you are, whether it's on the TNP, or whether you're on the Transfocados line, or whether you are on the Nembe Creek trunk line, people suffer significant losses of crude and significant deferments of production because of shutdowns of the TMP due to vandalization and maybe other operational things. This again is an imprint over and above the typical costs that we have with respect to OPEX. So when you look at these two parameters, you then understand why we are a significantly high cost environment. A couple of survival strategies. These are not exhaustive, because if I want to talk about them exhaustively, I probably will take more time than is allotted to me. Now, it's about controlling operating costs. We need to target direct and indirect operating expenditure, reduction in general and administration costs by new ways of working. There are many ways to do this. And if I leverage on what we're doing within Walter Smith here, it's a couple of things. Working from home, working remotely, even with respect to the operations crews that we have out there, working longer shifts on operations, using remote sensing type of things like drones to actually view certain things that we will physically have had to send crews out there to do, putting metering that is remotely accessed into the flow stations and all that. So there are so many things. And virtual training, capability building that is done virtually. And basically continue to work on this. And I can say that we've had some success with respect to the reduction, especially in direct operating expenditure, coming from significantly high numbers to basically lower than $10 a barrel in that. We need to renegotiate long-standing crude handling agreements. I keep mentioning that. These crude handling agreements with the RPC charges and the other operation charges have to be renegotiated, because we cannot believe that those are sustainable when you're paying over 10% of your sales price, the oil sales price, as the cost of crude handling to just transport the crude from your facility to the terminal. Vertical integration into mid and downstream. This is one of the things that Walter Smith has done. We need to have creative solutions to reduce crude export costs. Refineries, petrochemicals, pharmaceuticals, gas to power, and gas-based industry. These create some kind of stability against crude oil prices. And I'll tell you, a little bit about this stability. Look at modular refineries. One of the things that works in terms of refining margin is what is the transfer pricing mechanism you have. If you have a mechanism in which you can take leverage on lower oil prices, and the fact that whoever you're taking as a third-party supplier will save themselves all the crude losses and the cost of the crude handling charges, then you may be able to get a logistics margin that helps your refinery work very well at crude oil prices of lower than $40. Of course, when the crude oil price goes up, you can then export your crude, make money over there. So there's a counterbalancing effect if you have a vertically integrated midstream and downstream business with upstream business. Again, I refer to gas to power and gas-based industry, which with stability in the gas prices helps as well. Collaboration, reducing both operating and capital costs through collaboration. It's application of relevant technology, R&D collaboration to reduce costs, and also collaboration in areas of operation and even within the industry. And then lastly, diversification into other value-adding and sustainable sectors. I heard the Total DMD talk about diversifying into renewables. That's where Walter Smith is going. So while we go into gas to power, we ultimately want to reduce our carbon footprint by going into renewable energy, with the first focus being on solar energy. So that diversification is coming because it's not immediately here. Gas is the next source that we want to use, but it will come, and we better start looking towards that. So these survival strategies, again, I say they are not exhaustive: operating costs, vertical integration, collaboration, and diversification. Now I'll come into technology because I want to focus a little bit on this. The essence of technological innovations for business to technology mapping is to increase oil production at reduced costs. So effectively reducing your cost of production and your cost of operations. And I show over time what these technologies have done. None of these are developed in country. So one of the key things that we need to do is to focus on what we can deliver in country within Nigeria in terms of R&D collaboration, especially among the independents. But I need to point this out, that it is important to know that irrespective of what the oil price is doing, I can see the orange one is the unadjusted oil price in US dollars per barrel. Technological innovation has continued to grow production in millions of barrels per day. And we need to leverage on this because, like I said, the two parameters there are increased productivity, which is oil production increase at reduced costs. We bring down your unit technical costs, both operations and development costs. In terms of collaboration, I'll talk about 5 typical levers that we can use to help to reduce costs. This is work that currently IPPG is doing with McKinsey and Company. The 5 levers are about increasing utilization, reducing overhead, reducing lead times, standardization, and increasing production efficiency. Please take some time go through these slides. I won't go into details, but a couple of examples: vessel sharing and pooling, supply-based consolidation, bundling of procurement volumes across the industry in terms of independence and even OPTS as well, inventory sharing, alignment on standards of low complexity activities or equipment. And here, an estimation has been done in terms of the size of the prize over 3 different routines. So going forward, targeted collaboration opportunities, the big black ones are the major areas that we can collaborate and reduce costs, joint security of convoys and patrol coverages. And then we go further into broader independent collaboration opportunities, which are there as well. International shipping, can't we provide a joint shipping desk to coordinate and aggregate incoming shipments, farming on contracts, whether it's rig contracts, 3D seismic acquisition, whatever it is, joint contracting for projects as well, bundled procurement of consumables and commodities, and some standardization of materials and contracts. It is possible. In terms of strategic areas of operation, joint community relations activities so that we can build something that lasts for the community and is of value. And then finally, outside the independence, we can plug into IOC collaboration efforts because the international oil companies also have their collaboration efforts that are going on. So in general, there is a significant prize that we can achieve in terms of collaboration to bring down the cost of our doing business in this country. That is where I will end. And all I would say is that if we take these things seriously and we build these collaboration platforms amongst both the independents and within the oil producers trade section, we can start taking some actions to make sure that we can survive in low oil prices and continue those behaviors even when the oil price goes up. Thank you very much for this opportunity, Nafi, and thank you very much for the audience for listening to me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chikezie Nwosu. I can very well tell you, you are well on your way to clinching the President's Award, but we'll still find out. More speakers to go. Somebody can break your record. Switching immediately now, we go to KPMG as we listen to the chairman, KPMG Africa, Kunle Elebute. Mr. Elebute, I'm told that your slide is set and ready to go. Please confirm you're still on the call.
Yes, I am.
Take it away, sir.
So good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for having me here. I'll stand on all existing protocols. I think I'm going to have a very challenging pitch to make to all of you, having heard the earlier speakers today, and I think I'm going to try as much as possible not to repeat what they've said. I'm not an industry operator myself, although we work with a number of clients in the industry, and a number of the speakers who have spoken today are also clients of KPMG. So I'm in good company amongst all of you. So my outline of today is as follows. I'll set the context, I'll talk about the outlook, and then come up with some survival strategies. Same title as everybody else has spoken. I presume somebody's moving my slides for me, please. Is somebody moving my slides for me, please? I can see the slides and I'm not moving at all. Yeah. So you can move it, can keep moving. Certainly. Next slide, please. Next 2 slides. I'm not going to talk too much about the oil and gas industry, upstream, midstream, and downstream, because all of you here are players in the industry, so you know exactly what we're talking about. My next slide is about the twin shocks that has hit Nigeria, hit the globe. In fact, not just Nigeria. First of all, please go to next slide, please. We had the oil price wars early in the year, just before we went into the lockdown between Russia and Saudi Arabia. And then soon after that oil price war, of course, you didn't have the reduced economic activity by the COVID-19 pandemic. Thereafter, of course, we then went into lockdown. When WHO declared the COVID-19 as a pandemic on 11th March 2020, which meant that the global oil demand dropped sharply. This led to massive oversupply in the market, which triggered significant price drops. And I remember very well, I think it was the West Texas price, the futures price at one point even went below zero because there was significant oversupply in the market. So this year has been quite a challenging year for the industry as a whole. Next slide, please. So the industry is challenged by the ongoing twin shocks. If you look at the COVID-19 pandemic numbers, 50 million cases have been confirmed globally, 1.2 million deaths. In Nigeria so far, 64,000 cases confirmed, just over 1,000 deaths, which is what we have as official data. If you look at the Brent oil price in 2020, so far one of its worst price crashes in history. So what's been the impact on the global industry? We've seen significant reduction in exploration, development, and production activities, and 4 major areas of impact: supply disruptions, down revision of supply forecasts in response to ensuing global economic recession and oil demand shock. The only country that's come back into positive growth so far this year, I think, is China. Lower demand, impact of COVID-19 outbreak globally, resulting in negative impact on transportation of industrial fuels. Aggravated inventory glut. COVID-19 containment measures and movement restrictions led to tumbling fuel consumption and high productive inventory builds. You had tons of tankers just all over the globe, just couldn't move or couldn't even berth because of COVID-19 restrictions. And then falling oil prices are placing severe strains on company finances. And one of the other speakers spoke about cash. As price declines, putting pressure on cost structures and forcing a review options and priorities. So what has been the ripple effects of these twin shocks on Nigeria's economy? Is my next slide, please. So if you just take a view of where the economy since 2014. 2014 was a boom period where we averaged about 6% growth, and then 2015 we went into 2% growth, and then for the first time in 2016 we then hit our first recession. Recession is 2 consecutive quarters of negative economic growth. First recession for 25 years. We came out of recession late 2017. 2018 was a recovery stage. 2019 will continue to recover. We hope that by 2020 we'll move beyond the 3.5% to 4% growth rate. And then, we saw this other outlier that came from nowhere at all. So we've seen impact of the economy that, overall the economy is likely to reduce by 3.4%. Massive reduction in government revenue, so the fiscal deficit is huge. Upstream projects are significantly delayed. The oil price benchmark went down from 27 to 57 to an average of 28. And of course, production also scaled downwards because of OPEC cutbacks. And then we saw in the last quarter a minus 6.1% negative growth, contracting to a 30-year low. And such that we're likely to see another negative contraction also in Q3. We're waiting for the NBS results. And if you have 2 consecutive quarters of negative growth, officially we can say Nigeria is in recession. However, there's a projection that the GDP growth rate may pick up again next year to about 3%, but I think this is fairly optimistic, to be honest with you. So what's the outlook? I see the outlook in 3 perspectives. Okay, next 2 slides, please. First of all, investment in oil and gas, and then secondly, investment in renewables, and then thirdly, investor focus. So investment in oil and gas, we've seen that massive drop in demand, which has led to an oil price reduction. Upstream companies facing a tough decision of achieving the right balance between continued capital expenditure investments and ensure that all investments result in a positive net present value within the nearest future for its capital outlay. So that analysis has to be done, and if the NPV is not clear, it's not positive, then clearly you would either delay or cancel that capex program. And then investment in renewables. The global economies are looking to key into clean energy initiatives, driven largely by the Paris Accord, and therefore trying to diversify into various energy sources to reduce emissions and low-cost resources. World may not be set for decisive downward turns in emissions. However, with the recent U.S. elections, this may change because with the new president coming in the U.S., it's likely that the U.S. may change its approach to clean energy initiatives. And therefore, many of our companies will then need to carry out regular assessments of investments in the coming years in line with clean energy requirements. Lastly, investor focus, like somebody said earlier, one of the speakers said earlier, that around the fact that the market cap of oil companies have been dwarfed by the tech companies, which is, as tech is the future, and the future is now. But the investment in oil and gas industry appears to be waning due to fluctuating oil prices and in general declining of financial performance of some large oil companies. Upstream companies with current and planned investment in renewable energy are the ones who will be strategically placed for growth, and market capitalization, and we have a competitive advantage. So I think the advice here is that anybody in the oil and gas space essentially who's not going to play in that renewable space ultimately will not be a darling of the stock market, because renewables is clearly going to be one of the key things that are going to drive the energy demand in the near future. If you look at the next slide around what the IEA says is the world energy outlook, and they give us 3 different scenarios of what energy outlook. And you can see that 2018 was still below 100 million barrels a day, demand, and we dropped to just under 90 million barrels a day currently. There are 3 scenarios. One is a stated policy scenario, STEPS, which is that in the COVID-19 gradually brought to under control in 2021, presumably with the vaccines have been discovered, and the global economy returns to the pre-crisis levels, next year, which will see demand begin to pick up, reaching, not reaching 100 and crossing 100 million barrels by 2026. However, if we see the sort of second scenario, the delayed recovery scenario, which is designed in the same assumption as in the STEPS, but the prolonged pandemic causes lasting damage to the economic prospect. Either people refuse to take the vaccine, or the vaccine is not supplied fast enough, or it doesn't work, and we see another spike in COVID-19 again. In this case, the recovery will be much more slower, and I don't think we'll get to 100 million barrels a day for a long time to come. And the third scenario is what we call a sustainable development scenario, where there's a surge in clean energy policies and investment, and puts the energy system on track to achieve sustainable energy objectives in full, including the Paris Agreement for energy access and air quality goals. This will mean that you'll see a stabilization around 95 million barrels a day, and then by 2028 or so, drop below 90 barrels a day, and downwards all the way down below 70 million barrels a day by 2040. So these are scenarios, and as you say, nobody knows which of these 3 scenarios are likely to occur. It may be a combination of scenarios. We start with STEPS initially, and then go to SDS or maybe DRS, and then go to STEPS, and then go to SDS. So there's no clarity as exactly which one will be the predicted outlook for the industry. So let me then go to what I consider to be my own strategies for survival. Next slide, please. In terms of threats to the Nigerian oil and gas industry, there are two major areas. One is fiscal uncertainties, because there's the revenues from oil and gas are a critical component of our revenues for the government, and then increased focus on climate change and alternative sources of energy. So bringing it home, next slide, business will have to navigate the different phases of crisis maturity. First of all is reaction, responding to new challenges, resilience, managing through uncertainty, recovery, certain identified opportunities, and a new reality, which is adapting to a new world. And so next slide, I then break the survival strategies into three buckets of time frame. My first time frame is short term, next in 0 to 12 months, which more or less into 2021. And the first item I have there is passage of the PIB. This is a longer standing bill, and I think any bill, the bill, even though the bill may not be exactly what we wanted from day one, but just passing a bill in particular itself will hopefully make the industry much more attractive and much more predictable and much more sustainable, and therefore encouraging additional investments. It may not bring the investment that would have liked it to attract if the bill were much more progressive and much more attractive, but at least it will be a starting point from which thereafter, amendments of the bill can kick in. Secondly, is the whole issue of downstream and the refineries. And government should just decide either we're going to lock the refineries up permanently and just mothball them and they become museums, or do we divest them, concession them, and to any party who then want to renovate them and put them back into operations, such that at least when we have the refinery being built in Lekki coming on stream in 2022, that refinery doesn't become a monopoly for the entire industry. If you have one or two other refineries that are competing as well, and also because ultimately if you have much more capacity to refine than local demand, then we become a net exporter of product, and that just changes the game completely in terms of use of FX. Instead of using half 40% of our FX to import petrol and diesel and kerosene, then in effect we then generate FX from refining operations and supply the entire sub-region from west all the way down to southern Africa. And then thirdly, companies need to undertake a comprehensive view of their operating and financial arrangements with a plan to achieve an optimal cost management. And we heard that very clearly in the last speaker, where we really need to work on cost management, and then also a financing structure, a debt equity structure. I think combination of both, one on its own, just financing structure without cost management doesn't work. Cost management without the right, so you cannot do either of the two. You got to do both to achieve real comprehensive, review of your operating and financial arrangements, which will then drive profitability as well, increase profitability and investment. The next phase is medium term. And next slide, please, within 1 to 3 years, which is accelerate development of the domestic gas sector by implementing a fiscal framework that encourages pricing participation. I guess also pricing is also a key issue as well in gas. And so that CNG can become, the way to go for, especially for public transportation and haulage. Because and that can help to again bring down the cost of doing business across the economy generally. Second area I'd like to recommend is the government should sell down its current interest in current JV operations and come back to an IJV model just like LNG. And in all the IJV models, just like LNG, be 49% shareholder. Clearly, hopefully by doing that, by becoming an IJV, become much more efficient in terms of access to capital, decision making, lowering the cost of capex, lowering the cost of opex, and generally just becoming much more competitive operation than we currently have today. And thereafter, if you're much more efficient, and much more nimble and a lower cost producer, clearly if we can much more profitable, and then government take can be as big or probably even higher, from PPT and royalties and that kind of stuff, and dividend, because as you see from LNG today, government stake is both PPT and dividend. And there's no reason why we can't have the same model of the IJVs. And then finally, developing policies and frameworks for implementation geared towards gradual shift to sustainable energy objectives. So we have gas for power, we have gas for industry, we have gas for fertilizer, and so on and so forth. If you add that to, of course, to hydro and solar, then of course, the energy mix for the industry becomes much more, tilts towards more renewable energy over time. And then finally, we then get to in the long term. In the long term, for me, which is the next slide, please, implementing of policies and frameworks aimed at sustainable energy objectives that will attract investment on a portfolio basis. You're going to see some, for example, I can give an example. The electricity industry is going to go through a reshaping in the next year or two, particularly with tariff increase. And you're going to see a combination of GenCos and DisCos, not directly owning each other, but through common shareholding structures, so that you then create a power utility that is in both in generation business, distribution business, and so on and so forth. And also adding some renewable energy, to that portfolio. And you may therefore see power utility companies in the next 5 to 7 years that are valued over $1 billion, market cap, and they're going to list on the New York Stock Exchange, making it more attractive for investors to invest in there. So again, it's going to happen, and we are already seeing movements already happening in that sector. So I'm almost certain that your industry has to go through a similar kind of portfolio realignment as well. Next area is strategic partnership amongst players in the industry with a view to attracting investment in deep offshore, especially floating LNG technology. And then finally, technical capacity development, both in skills as well as the equipment within country for the sector. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Kunle Elebute, Senior Partner at KPMG in Nigeria and Chairman at KPMG Africa. Thank you so very much. I like the short, medium, and long-term approach to surviving that you put out there. I like the particular one that you talked about the refineries concession or allow some other persons to manage it. I think at some point I will ask those of you joining us online to just tell me in the comment section, this is me asking you, what is your take on that point he made? Okay, concession or sell or keep for government? What would you vote for? You tell us in the comment section. All right, so we continue to our next presenter, who is the Executive Director of Operations at Seplat Petroleum Development Company, PLC. He's in the room with us. Let's welcome Effiong Okon.
Thank you very much, Richmond. So good afternoon, everyone. And I hope you're all keeping safe and fit as well, because this is this, you stay at home and work from home. If you're not very careful, you're probably going to be adding weight and having some joint issues. So So I'd like to say a big thank you to NAPE. At Seplat, we've been very much in partnership with NAPE, working with NAPE in the past several years, and we have been a very strong supporter. And we use this medium to sort of learn and also share our own thoughts around how we're facing the challenges in the industry. Please, can you bring my slides? Hello? You know, Richmond has taken off part of our time, so we're told 20 minutes and then 15 and now 10. So what I'll do, I think the conversations are pretty much along the same line of thoughts from the previous presenters. What I'll just do is, for me, I think there are three key messages. One is to set a bit of context about the challenges we're facing. You hear twin shock, you hear all kinds of phrase. And then some bit of, practical things we've done from a Seplat point of view to remain in business, and also looking forward as well, how things like, renewables, energy transition becomes a great strategic opportunity. So that's what I like to, those are the key messages I want to drive across this afternoon. I will keen and we're really privileged to learn from you. I like to stand on existing protocol, by the way. So next slide. I mean, all of Nigeria is really endowed, blessed with so much resources, but if I listen to all the previous speakers, it's not about having so much resources, but it's really what you do about it, right? If you look at Singapore with nothing, but it's been a transformational country. So we can have all this, 37 billion of oil, 200 billion TCF of gas and all that. It will really can move very quickly. Like Bayo mentioned, we need speed. And then Victor talked about collaboration. Then all this, in 10, 20 years time will just be a bloody waste. So I think, but I'm actually excited about the future. Oil and gas remains a big part. It's been a big part of this economy and still going to be a very strong part of the economy going forward. Next slide, please. And so we heard about the twin shock. If you look at the slide on screen, so the way I tend to share the stories, if you had invested, say, I don't know, 100 Naira or $1,000 in Amazon or in Zoom before the COVID, say December, January, today you'll have made probably 300% of your investment, right? Zoom is about $400-500 now per share. It was less than 100 before COVID. But if you put that money in any oil company, you'll have lost half of your capital. So every oil and gas company has lost between 50-60% of their market cap. That means that 100 Naira is probably worth 40 Naira today. So it's not a really good time for our industry. We're under a lot of enormous pressure. COVID took out almost 15 million barrels of oil per day. And now we're looking at potentially closing that sort of demand gap, demand destruct going forward. If you look at all kinds of forecasts, we're looking at somewhere between 8 and 9 million barrels coming back. And you see all the lessening of the tightening by OPEC as a way of managing the demand supply balance. So it's been quite extraordinary, quite challenging times for us as an industry, and therefore we've got to step up. And that's the key message, I think, in the previous presenters, that is about how to drive down costs. We don't have a control on oil price, but what we do have a control on is how we're going to drive down costs. And that's where a lot of focus and a lot of energy has been. If I move on to the next one. So what's happened so far is, first was, production has gone down. If you look at Nigeria today, I mean, the budget was premised on about 2.2 million barrels per day. We've come down to roughly around 1.3 or so due to OPEC quota. So production is tanked, oil price is tanked, there's decline in capital expenditure, and there's also project competitiveness is also becoming unattractive. And finally, with COVID also being there, we have huge impact on HSC across our organization. But I think I'm actually proud to say oil and gas industry has actually responded resourcefully to managing all the operations throughout the pandemic period. I'm not aware of any company that's had to shut down. We in Seplat, we've gone out with a very strong COVID response plan, and we're able to run our activities across all production projects, drilling sites successfully with no shutdown, based on a combination of, doing PCR testing across all our assets, and then also people going to quarantine for 7 days. So I think the industry has been quite very successful in managing the pandemic. If I then look at the response from the government, next slide, please. I think the DPR came out with this 4 sort of response plan in June, where they looked at, okay, what can government do, and how can regulators also be part of that solution space in terms of looking at cost control and management. We've heard a lot about the GMD's aspiration to drive down unit operating costs down to less than $10 a barrel. We're all working that space. And then the bit about operational excellence and compliance, where we're looking at how can you really like Chike mentioned, vertical integration, moving from just being traditional oil and gas more to moving up the value chain, and how do you extract value from that process? And then the one around portfolio optimization, basically looking at your existing assets and try to prioritize and optimize and invest where you think the biggest value is for every dollar you put it in there, and deferring some activities, very much along the line which the previous speakers talked about. And the last one is around the strategic partnership. I think for us as an industry, the problem is no longer us competing with ourselves now. The issue is the oil price and the economy. So we all have a common enemy which we'll have to really compete together and really win. And that's the war we're fighting now in terms of survival, just like Bio articulated. And how do we move from a survival to a thriving mode? Next slide. And that's where we can get a bit of excitement. I mean, my experience being in this industry now for almost 30 years, I don't get energy from looking at the future as being doom and gloomy. We've got to try and bring in a bit of excitement, a bit of energy in, and that's the way we drive, innovation, new technologies, a new way of actually driving production. So in terms of practical, what I call strategies, you see on this slide, I tried to cover a few. People have gone through all already. Next one, please. And I'll probably touch on the ones that were probably not well covered. So there's cost optimization. There's portfolio diversification and optimization. There's a bit about collaboration in terms of logistics. For example, how do you share vessels for marine, for offshore assets? How do you share helicopter and bring down the cost? How do you come together to have common sequence around rig mobilization there where you can take off cost of mobilization and the mobilization of rigs. So lots of areas where we're beginning to look at collaborating more now than ever, as against everyone competing with one another. And it's about how do we make that cake, that pie, bigger than trying to maximize your part of the cake. And that's where it's been a lot of focus. Two areas I see a lot of huge change for us. Harnessing technology is a big one. We've seen how we've been able to drive down costs by even remote operating system. Looking at maintenance systems, bringing in data scientists to try and look at data, this whole big data, artificial intelligence. So you can move more from time-based maintenance to condition-based maintenance. Even from looking at compressors, vibration data and temperature and pressure, you can actually model and predict when to do your preventive maintenance, as against having to go in there and do lots of intervention all the time. Capital efficiency, also looking at your overall financing model. How do you bring down weighted average cost of capital? How do you combine debt, equity, bond, and all that bit? It's a really, really critical part, because if you can attract finance, you really can develop these assets. The other part is also hedging. So we tend to hedge in Seplat, something. Those days I remember there used to be a lot of debate in the board and management team that why are we even paying so much on hedging? Now we're seeing huge value out of hedging, right? So I then go on to what I also did, compare go to the next one, please. Just look at what's happened in the US. US has a huge number of independents, similar to Nigeria probably has, we're still moving in the independent space. So we've got lots of independents emerging and indigenous operators. You can see how they've responded to this challenge. First is around asset divestment. They've had to basically suspend dividend payout. You see all that in the press. Lots of companies have filed for bankruptcy to help them restructure their financing, the credit facility, debt refinancing. If you then go on to HR on the people's side, there's a lot of downsizing, both on contractor and on own workforce. Bio talked about even the share reshape going on today, which is going to deliver a new organization that will have implications on people, for example. So staff salaries are being reduced, driving G&A down by 40%. If you then go to the OPEX side, I think Chike did a very nice in terms of breaking the OPEX down, like crude handling, security, all that. So much inefficiency we'll have around onshore Nigeria. You can see here as well, people are driving down their cost. And then on the capital expenditure side, you see lots of investment being put on hold or deferred, or huge cutback in terms of CapEx level by about 50%. So, and the last one is about government advocacy. And I don't want to go through all the PIB, but government advocacy is quite critical in terms of having the right policies and the right framework in place to attract investors. If I then go on to the next one, which is what we have done in Seplat, you then see along those cool line of thought. Next slide, please. We've had to rationalize CapEx, OPEX, focusing on what really delivers cash for now. And therefore, you want to conserve cash so you can meet all your obligations while you try to rephase a number of the big projects. Next slide, please. What's happening? Okay. Second one is about negotiating contracts. This is a bit of a difficult one. When we brought a lot of contractors to try and renegotiate, they all come back to say, look, 2014, 15, 16 has been very difficult years. And now you're trying us to drive down 40%. down in cost. It's been very challenging, but we've been able to achieve quite some good reduction in terms of services and rates. Inventory is another big one. You look at a lot of companies today, they carry huge amount of inventory in their balance sheet. And that's an area where we'll have to look at drilling very deep to take out inventory so you don't build inventory that's not really adding value and it's sitting in your balance sheet, and then you have obsolescence of spares, for example, in your warehouse. And then the bit on technology and you'll see. So on technology, next slide, please. Just a few examples of how we've been able to be, next one, please, to bring down development costs of our projects. So we're going back to the same old seismic as again shooting new seismic. You look at old seismic, you reprocess old seismic data, look at better imaging of deep reservoirs, and that way you're able to then sidetrack existing wells to tap much deeper reservoirs. In that process, we've been able to also unlock new plays. Explorers like to talk about play-based exploration. So based on this, we've been able to open up new opportunities, and that way we're driving new development and also bringing down unit development costs. Next one, if you then look at wells is also an area we spend lots of money. Rather than target small reservoirs with independent wells, we're now targeting multiple reservoirs with single wells, and therefore you can connect sub-economic reservoirs and bring those to production. These are reservoirs in the sub 1, 2, 3 million barrels sort of reserves category. You know, for independents, we don't have the big luxury, you know, the big IOCs like Shell, Total, where they have a stock of 1 billion barrels. We're looking at very small reservoirs and old fields where we're bringing to maximize value. So using smart wells, straddle completion, multiple zones, we're able to bring in on stream sub-economic reservoirs. Next one. And then horizontal well is also one we're playing with a lot of all these very thin oil rims, very large spans of reservoirs. You're looking at potential channel sand and sometimes shore phase. We have been able to use horizontal well with periscope technology to try and target those thin oil rim and be able to bring those production on stream. And this has led to unlocking a huge amount of reserves and turning those to economic development. So this way we're trying to maximize production, even in a low capex world, driving down costs and also bringing more and more production on stream. Now, energy transition is another very interesting one. Next slide, which I'll just talk to briefly. If you look at the BP outlook, I think this is something that everyone has talked about. It is a concern, but at the same time, it is an opportunity. Next slide, please. If you look at the BP energy transition, there are 3 scenarios which BP has shared, and I think everyone believes there's going to be change in terms of that energy mix. Whether all remains 50% or 80% is a bit of a debate. But according to BP, they believe peak oil is past us already. 2019 as a peak oil. Some people don't believe in that. They still think peak oil is sometime in 10, 15 years from now. But what's really critical is renewables is coming in. You also have hydro, nuclear, while coal and oil will begin to decline over time. The only issue is how sharp that curve will be. Depends on what you believe in and what you think and whether you're a very strong advocate for the environment. So we are looking at this trend in Seplat, and we're trying to reposition ourselves and look at how do we make our business robust in terms of today, the medium and the long term as we go through energy transition. And that's where the gas story comes in very strongly. And I'll talk a bit about that shortly before I close. So we're using gas as a bridge between today and the future, and huge investment in gas. So next one is the role of gas, and then I'll then close. The role of gas, Nigeria is really blessed with gas. Next slide, please. If you look at the gas African distribution, apart from when Tullow discovered so much gas around the Central African ring of, Mozambique, Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Nigeria has always been the largest, even up to today in Sub-Saharan Africa, we still carry the largest gas reserves discovered, and even the undiscovered scope still remains even double or triple the discovered. Well, that shows huge potential. But at the same time, only 10% of gas today in Nigeria is actually used. Like you all know, half of that goes into injection, a quarter is exported, and then very 10% of that is what goes into power. So there is a huge scope for power here when you look at gas becoming the bridging energy source going forward to try and power the domestic space. And I know NNPC is quite very ambitious in terms of ramping up from under a BCF of gas today to about 3.5 BCF of gas if we look for 5 years from now. I think that's going to have a huge impact on our economy. Next one, please. But there are a lot of challenges around gas. And if you look at the challenges and the drivers, we'll see so much around, from domestication and LPG, capacity building, gas fiscalization, all the issue around power shortage. We're all familiar with the federal government work on Siemens phase 1 and phase 2 to unlock that whole power sector. Bankable gas contracts, the whole partial risk guarantee space, strong linkage across the power, agri-transport sector, access to capital, private sector-led activities, Niger Delta security, all that bit is what's going to ensure that we're able to harness that whole gas potential. Next one, and the good thing about gas is I always say, let's not get into the debate of export, import, or domestic. There's enough gas to keep everyone happy, whether you're in the domestic gas space or in the export gas space. Gas to power, gas to chemical, gas to fertilizer, so much opportunity. I was in Qatar for about 5 years when Qatar moved from being almost a non-relevant country to the biggest LNG supplier in the world. I was part of the Train 7, Train 8 million tons per annum mega train project. So this is doable. It's not magic. It is doable as far as there's the right will. And we have the right commitment, and also we're all aligned towards the same goal. So gas, for me, is quite huge potential for Nigeria. So those are the key message on this slide. Next one, please. And then, so there are a lot of issue around, fiscal and pricing challenges. Like we all know, the government has done a lot in terms of moving that gas master plan, but there are still issues around cost-reflective tariff. The whole Nigerian gas policy have been met largely, a lot of it, but there's still the issue around how do you then move from a willing buyer to willing buyer, willing seller sort of mode. And this whole issue about export parity pricing, something we're also advocating, we got to adjust that for processing cost. So if I then go to the last one, I think what has Seplat done so far, which is my last slide. If you look at the slide on screen, next please. So we have basically built very strong infrastructure on gas. So it's then easy to tap and develop, to bring in low-cost producers and to latch on those existing infrastructure we build. So in the West, we have the Oben gas plant and the Sapele gas plant. Collectively, those two gas plants will process over 560 BCF of gas per day. We're working on Asen North in Imo State, where we're building a 300 million scof of gas processing plant in Imo State. If that comes on stream next year, then Seplat will no doubt become the biggest domestic gas player in the country. And today, as we speak, we actually account for almost 30% of the power which you're all consuming in this country today. It shows our strong belief. We are an indigenous company. We believe strongly in Nigeria, and we're pretty much aligned with the vision to transform this country through investment in gas. So with the Ano hub and the Oben and Sapele hub, then we're well positioned to basically drive that transformation and supporting that whole government transformation objective in terms of using gas as a key disruptive energy for Nigeria's economy going forward, be it gas to power, gas to chemical, gas to fertilizer, and all that. So overall, if I just summarize then and step back, so I hope I've been able to share with you a number of the contexts around oil and gas. It's a very tough time for us. Not just oil prices low, countries' economy are tanking, but also investors don't want to invest in oil and gas again. We then have the energy transition issues. So Nigeria's got to be competitive. And I strongly believe if we can bring back competitiveness, we can then attract investors back, and we can then make Nigeria another, will I say, attractive destination, and then we can then begin to compete with the Arabs or the Russians. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Effiong Okon is the Executive Director, Operations at Seplat Petroleum Development Company, PLC, telling us the contributions of their company and how they believe practically we can survive this low oil prices. Thank you so very much. Switching gears immediately because of how much time we've lost, we're going straight to the next presentation, and this time we're going to the Director, Sub-Saharan Africa Upstream Research for Wood Mackenzie, joining us live via Zoom. I pass it on now to Gail Anderson. Anderson,
Hello.
you make the...
Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you can see my screen and hear me.
Hear you, yes. Your video, yes. We can see you, Gail.
Okay, and the slides, I'm sharing my slides, so hopefully they will appear shortly. If not, I did send them through.
I'm sure you can go ahead and share. Are you having difficulties sharing?
I am sharing. It's, let's just check.
So your screen is being, is coming on now. There you go.
You got it? Great. Okay, thank you very much, Richmond. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you to NAPI for inviting Wood Mackenzie to speak at today's session. Wood Mackenzie is a leading provider of research and consulting in the oil and gas, power and renewables, chemicals, metals and mining industries. And we've over 20 years of experience covering Nigeria's oil and gas sector. Today's session is about survival strategies in a low oil price environment. And today I want to present a few themes which I think are very relevant for Nigeria. Next slide, please. So in my presentation today, I will be talking about advantaged barrels, portfolio resilience, and drivers for potential M&A activity. Next slide, please. Now, it's not a new concept, but in the wake of 2020 and the looming energy transition, we're hearing a lot more about advantaged barrels. But what do we mean by that? Well, it's quite simple, really. Advantaged barrels means low break-even, low carbon barrels with the best chance of commercialization. Sounds simple, doesn't it? So here's a checklist for advantaged oil and gas on the left. And on the opposite of this is disadvantaged oil and gas. So no surprises then that it's the advantaged barrels that stand the best chance of being developed. Now, if we look at advantaged barrels, we can think about what this might mean in the Nigerian context. Well, first of all, Nigeria has traditionally enjoyed strong demand for its light sweet crude, which trades at a premium to Brent. And although there are market constraints for gas here in Nigeria, NLNG's exports, again, are very marketable and make Nigeria a top 5 LNG exporter globally. And in general, of course, the geology of the Niger Delta is considered world-class with low subsurface risks relative to other basins. So these are the positives. And of course, that means that Nigeria also has some disadvantaged oil and gas with high costs of production, which you've heard about, high emissions with gas flaring, of course, adding to the problem. And the weighted average remaining government share across all terrains in Nigeria is nearly 80%, which is fairly high by international standards. Now, of course, the PIB might change this, but this is where we stand today. And finally, there are significant above ground risks, particularly in the onshore delta. Now, many of these are well-known problems, so I won't go into them, while the PIB is obviously on its way through the National Assembly. And obviously contains improved terms for those who opt for them. But clearly, disadvantaged oil and gas stands less chance of being developed. Next slide, please. Now, while we're talking about advantaged barrels, why does it matter? Well, before 2020, the energy transition was already in progress, but post-2020, we expect it to accelerate with most of Nigeria's main investors setting targets towards net zero carbon emissions. And since the last price crash in 2014, we've heard the mantra of value over volume. But in 2020, most producers were still caught out by the sudden collapse in oil prices. Investors are taking this to the next level. It's not simply any kind of value, it's about prioritizing the development of the most advantaged resources, which will deliver the best value per barrel. Now, the focus is on optimizing value within the portfolio, not simply achieving value by maximizing recovery. Now, this type of approach favors new fields over old fields, but interestingly, it could enable assets to change hands, with new investors perhaps being better equipped to increase value. But of course, it could also accelerate the decommissioning of disadvantaged fields. This optimization strategy could create tension with governments that are still keen to maximize resource recovery, raising fiscal risk. Now, if we could go on to the next slide. I want to give you a case study of how costs can change through the life of an asset and what this could mean, again, in the Nigerian context. This is the Johan Sverdrup field in Norway. It was discovered in 2011 in the middle of the central North Sea, a mature province with over 40 years of production. So it was a huge surprise to find a 2.5 billion barrel field after all that time. Now, it's sanctioned in 2015, and the estimated full life of field costs were $12 a barrel. Now, the costs here include CapEx and OpEx. $12 a barrel is well below what you'd see in Nigeria. But even so, because this project was developed during a period of very low oil prices, there were significant cost savings delivered to allow it to achieve that price. Now, Johan Sverdrup came on stream in 2019, and as with all fields, The lowest unit cost point is at peak production, which was $7 per barrel. Keep your eyes on the light blue line here. Now, as the reserves are produced, the unit costs start to increase gradually at first. And it's not until 2027, 8 years from first oil, that the window of advantaged oil closes. By that, we mean that the point forward costs start to exceed the full life of field costs at FID in 2015, which remember were $12 per barrel. So that's point 3 on the chart. In fact, as the field goes through midlife, the unit costs keep creeping up year on year, so that the total cost over the remaining 33 years ranges from $13 per barrel to as much as $43 per barrel. This is the window, and a rather wide one at that, of disadvantaged oil. Now, what does this mean? To be clear, this doesn't mean that the field is losing money in late life. It is generating free cash flow in every year after first oil. But the key takeaway is that the value per barrel is in decline. We see diminishing value per barrel every year as more and more effort and expenditure is required to recover the resources through secondary and tertiary recovery and so on. And of course, for a huge field, there will be much maintenance and upkeep expenditure in the longer term, often much more than is anticipated at the beginning. Now, this is a good example to show you because Johan Sverdrup is a modern development using the latest technology. Compare this with many of Nigeria's offshore fields, many of which have been in production since the early 1970s. These fields are well past the advantaged oil window, require billions of dollars of expenditure to maintain them and keep them operating safely. But the value per barrel is small. Instead of spending billions to keep these old fields going, would you be better off developing greenfield assets because you get more value per barrel? If you think about the ExxonMobil JV, for example, only about 25 fields out of 75 have ever been developed. Is it better to keep these old fields going or divert resources to develop new ones? Next slide, please. Now then, this one is another case study, and it's this time a giant deep water gas field in Egypt called Zohr. It was sanctioned in 2016 and came on stream really quickly in 2017. The full life of field costs were only $7 per barrel. But as production's ramped up, the point forward unit costs have fallen to around $4 per barrel. And because the field will have a long production plateau, it won't be until 2036, nearly 20 years after first gas, that the point forward unit costs overtake the full life of field costs. So the window of advantaged gas is much longer than for an oil field. And not only that, the costs in the disadvantaged window are not that much higher at $7 to $9 per barrel. Now, again, this is important in the Nigerian context because Zohr supplies the domestic market at a price which is attractive to the upstream suppliers and which guarantees a rate of return of around 15%. Of course, Nigeria, as we know, has massive gas resources, around 200 TCF. So even allowing for the higher costs in Nigeria, the country is very well positioned in terms of advantaged barrels if only the government can set the correct legal, fiscal, and commercial framework to make this happen. Next slide, please. And this slide is simply a snapshot from Wood Mackenzie's Lens platform. Now, we've spoken a lot about advantaged barrels and how gas, particularly in lower risk locations like shallow water, can deliver that. It's worth pointing out that we estimate Nigeria has around 9 billion barrels of resources in shallow water which are awaiting development. But many of these have been waiting for well over 20 years or longer. There is enough here to supply and grow the domestic market and keep LNG exports for many years to come. Nigeria should be doing everything it possibly can to accelerate the development of these resources in the face of the energy transition. It's not simply about the PIB and the upstream fiscal terms, it's about the commercial framework and the business environment along the value chain to make this happen. There's still so much to do in this area, but if it doesn't happen soon, then these advantaged resources risk being permanently stranded. That is the danger. Next slide, please. Now, this slide is about portfolio resilience. And what do we mean by resilience? Resilience means the ability of a portfolio to withstand oil price volatility. Now, the chart on the left looks at portfolio resilience amongst a selection of Nigerian producers. It shows the impact of a change in oil price on the remaining value of the company. This is based on our long-term oil price of $50 a barrel. So we looked at the percentage change in value if we ran the portfolios at a low $30 price and then at a high $70 price using our Lens platform. Now, the bigger the spread of values, the more sensitive the company is to oil price, and the smaller the spread, the more resilient the company is. Now, take Seplat, for example, at the bottom on the left-hand side, you can see that it's the most resilient to price among its peers. For example, a 40% reduction in oil price to $30 a barrel only causes a 24% decline in value. Now, this is because Seplat's portfolio is increasingly weighted towards gas, and we heard Effiong talking about that just a few moments ago. And not only that, the gas price it receives are not linked to Brent. That gives it a resilient portfolio. But at the other extreme, we can see that Conoil is very exposed to low oil prices on account of its production being 100% oil. But equally, and this is important, we can say that it, as well as others such as AMNI and ITO, stand to benefit greatly if oil prices strengthen, unlike the companies at the bottom. Now, there's no right or wrong position here, and of course, it might depend on what your view of the long-term oil price is. Now, the key-eyed among you will be aware that Oando, AMNI, Niger Delta E&P seem to be less resilient, even though they have a lot of gas in their portfolios. The difference for these companies is that the gas they sell is mostly to NLNG, and the price they receive is ultimately linked to Brent. So it's not enough to have gas. You ideally want to sell it at a fixed price or a price linked to something other than Brent. Now, of course, a driver of resilience is your operating cost, and we know the operating costs in the Niger Delta are typically a lot higher than where we'd like them to be. And we know the leaders of NNPC and the ministry and many of today's speakers have spoken at length about the need to bring these down. Now, the chart on the right is a snapshot of direct OPEX per barrel in 2020 for the same group of companies. And what it shows is that, again, there's a spread of OPEX costs depending upon location and portfolio. If you look at the left-hand side of the chart, you can see it's deep water producers such as South Atlantic Petroleum and FAMFA that enjoy the lowest OPEX, thanks to fields such as Egina, Akpo, and Abami. Unsurprising, given the offshore location of the fields, the potential for cost savings on board the FPSOs, and of course, Egina being on plateau helps as well. However, beyond these deep water producers, you can also see that OPEX per barrel increases along the x-axis as companies tend to have more oil in their portfolios relative to gas. Although some producers have mature offshore oil operations such as AMNI and Conoil. However, onshore producers on the Forcados pipeline system suffer from higher OPEX because of the very high cost of using piped exports while suffering significant crude losses, which means the unit OPEX is very high. So while gas certainly helps keep OPEX lower, it's also true that avoiding onshore pipelines is another way in which operators can keep those costs down while improving their resilience to low prices. Next slide, please. And this is the last slide that I've got today. And one of the main consequences of 2020 is we're going to see a significant restructuring of the upstream industry globally, driven by the need to be resilient and have access to the most advantaged assets. There's a huge existential risk to the industry that it's facing up to on carbon. Companies are worried about staying investable through the energy transition and are moving towards strategies that will appeal to investors, such as reducing their emissions, having net zero targets. And this is why we're hearing so much about environmental, social, and governance, or ESG, issues these days. Companies which don't adapt and give a compelling message on the sustainability of their business will struggle to attract investment and ultimately struggle to survive. We've already seen companies change direction, such as Cosmos, one of the premier explorers and developers in Africa, moving away from oil exploration in new basins and pivoting towards gas. And of course, BP has famously said it plans to reduce its oil production by 40% by 2030. But we're also seeing industry consolidation taking place with a flurry of activity lately. We've seen Chevron acquiring Noble, ConocoPhillips acquiring Concho Resources, and Chrysaor taking over Premier in the North Sea. Deal activity has really picked up, and industry consolidation will accelerate in 2021. There are different drivers for each of these deals, but the slide here shows just some of the drivers, many of which are particular to Nigeria, which may drive thoughts towards industry consolidation. Now, of course, it's noticeable that despite the Indigenous sector being very well developed in the last decade, we've seen little evidence of consolidation, CPLAT's acquisition of Eland a year ago being the only obvious example. It's no coincidence that both companies were publicly owned with levels of transparency and corporate governance which enabled such a deal to happen. Given the struggles that many Nigerian companies have had through this downturn, when they're still recovering from the last one, there are many compelling reasons why producers should consider joining forces to access advantaged barrels, build in resilience and sustainability in the long term. Indeed, sharing of infrastructure and joint developments is something which the government is keen to see, yet there's not enough examples of this. It seems that many companies in Nigeria prefer to maintain their independence rather than have safety in numbers. That may be so, but there is no doubt that the upstream industry will look radically different in another 10 years. The number of E&P companies will shrink significantly. And to finish, Nigeria's upstream sector cannot ignore the forces that are shaping our industry. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you so much, Gail. Gail Anderson is the Director of Sub-Saharan Africa Upstream Research for Wood Mackenzie. Thank you so much, Gail. We're switching gears now immediately to the final speaker before the panel session. And quickly, without much ado, I'm going back still on the webinar. We're bringing up the Managing Director of New Cross E&P Nigeria Limited, Victor Soji. Victor, did you make the call?
Yes, I'm with you. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear, sir.
Okay, I'm trying to share my screen. My video is not starting, so somebody should help me. Okay, I think. Okay, are you seeing my screen?
If your screen has my picture on it, yes. Otherwise, it's coming up.
I think so.
Not yet. It's coming up.
Okay.
Is he able to share his screen now, DK? Is he able to share his screen? Okay.
Are you seeing my screen?
Not yet. Are you having difficulty sharing your screen, sir?
I am not.
If you do, from here.
Except you will say from there.
Oh, okay. What is your video on?
Yes, it's on. Are you seeing me?
Okay, yeah, I can see you. I can see your slide. So you can go on, sir.
Let me be sure it's moving. Sorry.
They're the one sharing. Okay, they're the ones sharing their screen, your slides, sir. So if you need to change, just tell them to change and they will change.
Oh, I'm not able to see anything again. Okay. Just give me 1 second. I think I've touched too many buttons. So, okay.
You sound. Okay, Mr. Soji, are you still having difficulties? Can you hear me, sir? Mr. Soji, are you online? Mr. Soji, can you hear me? He's not online. Maybe he's having network issues. Oh, okay. 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 So since let's give Mr. Soji a few minutes to perhaps he's having network issues. Is he back online now? He's not back online. I guess if he's not back online, we can just proceed to the panel session and do justice to that. I want my microphones now, please. All three of them. Yeah, bring them. 3. Minus my own 3.
Check 1, 2.
Okay. So we're going straight to the panel session. We had intended to do this while he was speaking, so to get ready for the panel session while he was speaking. I want a third one there. Social distance the chairs. Okay, interesting. What are my mics? Okay, so yes, please go ahead on the chairs. Go ahead on the chairs. Go ahead. While we wait for his technical issues to be resolved, we'll just continue with the panel session. The chairman, Belema Oil E&P, is our moderator for this session. He's also a fellow of our association, Mr. Nedo Osayende. Boss, please, if you can take your seat. So he's joined on the panel by the sales and marketing manager for Schlumberger Nigeria and West Africa, Dal Walker. Mr. Walker. They are joined on the panel by the executive director of operations for Seplat, Effiong Okon. Effiong. Now, all the other speakers whom we've listened to are all part of this panel. So we still have online Kunle Elebute, senior partner KPMG Nigeria. Can we confirm that Kunle is in the room? Can we confirm he's in the room? He's on the panel? DK, can we confirm? We also have on the panel Chike Ziengosu, the CEO of Watersmith. Can we confirm he's there? Gail has just spoken to us. Can we confirm that Gail is there? Gail is there. Okay, they're all in the room. They're all in the room, right? So whenever Victor comes up, you let me know. I'll tell the moderator he can then take Victor at the time that he will decide for Victor. So we're set for the panel session. I yield the floor now, the stage to Mr. Nedo Osayende, FNAPESA. Is he not coming on? Sound.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, especially to you out there online, as well as to those.
Hello. Hello.
Oh, Soji, are you back?
Yes, I'm back. Okay,
I think it's just best for us to just wait and have you do your presentation.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry about it. No surprise. So I'll go through my slide here. I don't want to bother to share it now. You have it over there. So I've just talked about the reasons for the drop, which everybody have mentioned in this. And I looked at I actually looked at the various countries and how the chunk of the countries were all down because of the COVID-19. America, China, all went down on lockdown, and that was a great impact on the business. And then looking at the impact, we also recognize the fact that that actually affected us. There was also disagreement between OPEC and Russia. That was a major issue that could not allow us Okay. So I'll go straight to this the strategy. What I have said in the future of the industry is we recognize the fact that a couple of the IOCs, the LOCs are actually highly geared, and this is going to bite very hard on them because they can no longer service the debt as required. And this pandemic was recognized even by DPRO as a force majeure. So the future of the oil and gas industry will define how we respond, recover, and thrive during this crucial time. And this has been flogged by most of the speakers. So the key survival strategy. I've said here that operation excellence is key. In this business environment, the commodity price is uniform to all investors. Our competitive edge is in innovation and business strategy during this, while in the dynamics. Cost optimization also have been mentioned here. We see that the IOCs have an advantage here because as cost of fund is actually the major burden on the LOCs in Nigeria. That's we just borrowed money to actually acquire the assets, and their present cash water flow can no longer support the outstanding obligation. So that is a major thing. So what must we do at this time? And we need to be able to leverage on most of the initiatives that have been itemized by government, like the CBN, the Debt Management Board initiative. We need to do some restructuring in times like this for us, for the business to survive. There's need to actually, at this time, begin to sensitize the Financial Reporting Council of the major issues so that will not be classified or your business will not be put under what you call a no-going concern. So those are the things we need to do. We need to also consider option of estimating our returns. We need to be able to talk to our board, like one of our colleagues has mentioned here. We need to be able to sensitize the shareholders at this time. There won't be anything like dividend. We need to be able to do some buyback so that we can continue the business year after. So share buyback should be an option to be able to make sure that the business continues. And there's also it's opportunity for us to actually use this situation for a rethink, a time to rethink our strategy and then determine the future of our business. We need also optimize the value chain, just like what some of our colleagues have already started doing, looking at the upstream, the midstream, and the downstream. Most of us have predominantly been an upstream business. Few people have considered the midstream, and a lot of our independent are now coming up with the downstream. So this is a time for opportunity for us to look at the entire value chain and optimize our resources and see how we can do better. Just to conclude, not to bore us down, because we have had so many discussions, but my conclusion here says the effect of the COVID-19 pandemic is going to be here for quite some time. And so we all have to rethink our business. The long-term effect is going to be there. We need to rework our business strategy to see how we can improve and recover. A lot of people are looking down on checking if we can double down on fossil fuel infrastructure and then inspire. We need to also go into the clean oil, clean energy mix, and recognize the long-term economic trend and then urgent threats to the climate change. So we need to consider all this while we try to improve the business. So do nothing is not an option. We can be more creative as entrepreneur and explore every opportunity to improve the bottom line. Cost must go down. We must be efficient in our operation. We must also consider safety as major part. So we're actually dwelling on the tripod: the safety part, the operation excellence, and cost down. Those things at this time will be key for us to survive in our business. So I just want to close by saying this, and I know that there is quite kind of a disruption in my slide and my coming in, but I hope that we have been able to pick one or two things from what I have shared with us, and that is one of the things. As a company, as New Cross, we have actually leveraged on operational excellence to be able to operate safely and to be able to manage the host community where we operate. Where we operate was actually a very difficult place to operate. But by the time we got in there, Shell had major challenge really operating that. So most of the facilities were actually very, very down. But with the strategy we deployed, we have been able to turn things around, and we are safely operating in that place, managing the host communities and our operation. So thank you very much, and good afternoon to everyone. We'll just go to the round table discussion where any questions for me, I can answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Victor Soje of New Cross. By way of the official start of this last segment for today, let's remind ourselves that what we're discussing is the future of oil and gas industry in a low oil price world environment, in a low oil price environment, survival strategies. I've listened to quite a number of talks all day today, and I'd like to just tease out a thread from what I've heard. I've heard that there's a tough time for oil and gas going forward in view of the twin shocks that we suffered in Nigeria from COVID-19 and the oil price wars. And as such, investment in oil business is likely to be very challenged, especially enunciated by Mr. Elebute. We will have a situation where we are struggling to survive, although the MD of SNEPCO, Mr. Bayo Julari, added that in addition to working on strategies for survival, we have to also work on strategies for thriving. In the midst of the chaos, there's still some room for thriving. There's been talk about the movement from oil to gas. I'd like to just oppose that with the global drive to get to cleaner energy and for a better world. And Nigeria's main contribution, in spite of all the discussions on solar power and the like, Nigeria's main contribution will be in movement from oil and gas oil consumption towards gas utilization in Nigeria. For example, if we recognize that by merely shifting to cooking with gas or driving our cars with gas, we'll have made the most contribution we can. Different countries will have different levels of contribution they can make as we go along. There was a talk about the fact that because of this shift of the world moving into cleaner energy, then the resources we have, especially oil, may become stranded, which is the more reason why we need to develop, as it were, now. In the midst of having the great difficulty of finding increasingly difficult to find investment fund, that's a challenge. So we need to talk to that. Now, I'd just like to remind us that the various presenters we've had today, Mr. Kunle Elebute, Effiong Okon of Seplat, Chikezie Nwosu of Watersmith, Victor Soje of New Cross, and Gail Anderson of Woodmark. Most of them have had, I've made presentations here, apart from myself and Mr. Gary Walker. So I'd like to just start by throwing the first questions, given the fact that, especially as I'm not able to get questions online, for which I'll be asking Suji if you do have. Chikezie Nwosu talked about the fact that arising from a difficulty we're having in terms of oil price and the fact you have high costs, disciplines have come in, but as oftentimes in human nature, when times get rosier, then we tend to become not disciplined. So Chike, if you're on the line, I'd like to just tease out from you, how do you think that the lessons we are learning now in these difficult times, we will be able to retain when conditions become rosier tomorrow?
Yeah, thank you very much, my good friend Nedo. Can you all hear me?
Absolutely, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so let me try my best to capture what I mean with respect to bad behaviors. And some of these bad behaviors when the oil price goes up needs to be managed from the top down and also to be embraced from the bottom coming up. A couple of areas. We tend to, when the oil price goes up, start spending money as if there's no tomorrow. Our G&A costs skyrockets because the staff and the unions are demanding more and more pay. Things that we could have taken a little more seriously in terms of the way we actually do our contracting and supply chain management, we loosen up on that. Business technology that should be bringing down costs, increasing production and bringing down costs. I've taken a look across. Every time I've got a service provider who comes to me and says to me that they're going to deliver this sparkling new technology that is going to do heaven and earth for my assets, I've taken a look back and said, well, you know, they usually come back and say it's been a technical success without being a commercial success. And the reason why they can do this is that when the oil price is very high, there's a significant buffer that companies can rely on to continue to make a profit. Now, what we have to do is, and it will take time and effort, is to ingrain in each of these companies a sense that it's a long-term business. It's not just short-term for when the oil price goes up or down. Your planning is a lifetime plan. That's why I love what Gail showed, Gail Anderson, in our presentation about the asset she took up on. If you look at the early time in the asset, it looks as if everything was rosy. And then later on, you then understand the challenges that the asset will face. So if you take a life cycle approach to all the cost elements, not a life cycle approach only to the fact that the oil price is going to vary, but a life cycle approach to all your costs. Understand regularly what these cost drivers are. We keep talking about collaboration. We're not collaborating enough within the Nigerian space. Because one of the interesting things about collaboration is about best practice sharing as well. It's not just about rig shares or whatever shares. It's about best practice sharing. And then in addition, let us be our own critics in that collaboration effort. And I'll try and explain what I mean by being our own critics. I'll just take one example. If we take rig sharing, for example, how much do we typically drill a land rig at about 6,000, 7,000 feet subsea to? Now, if you ask across the industry, there are varying comments. I've heard as high as $18 million per well, and I've seen as low as $8, $9 million per well. If we start collaborating in rig sharing, collaborating in the practices that have led to the people who are achieving the best in this area, and use those ones as sounding boards for the behaviors that we want to maintain going forward. I think that knowledge sharing within that collaboration space would ensure that we keep certain behaviors. Nobody wants to be in that collaborative network and still be doing wells that are twice as expensive as the other party. So I don't know the right word to use. It's about self-discipline, but self-discipline as a collective within a collaborative effort. And stop looking at the oil price. You don't have any control over it. Look at how you can manage down your costs. Now, Gail also mentioned about resilience. And again, that's an area that I'd like as well, because it's not about making as much as you can. When you say there are different models, Gail, I understand that. Now, when the oil price goes up, everybody seems, there are quite a number of companies that, everything is rosy. NPV10 increases by 3, 4-fold. When the oil price goes down, everything goes the other way. Now, those are not resilient companies if from your own definition. It's always good to have a balanced portfolio in such a sense that you will make profit, even if it's not in quadruples or whatever when the oil price goes up. But you show yourself against where the oil price goes down so that you don't go down that negative on the NPV. When investors see that resilience,
thank you very much,
portfolio, then they are ready to invest there. So these are a couple of the things that we should do to make sure that those behaviors are sustained.
Thanks, GK, for that. In my experience as well, I have come to see that in low oil price world, oil companies are able to negotiate with suppliers, contractors, service providers for reduced costs. That begins to go in the direction of the kind of discipline you talked about. However, when prices recover, then the service companies like Schlumberger come up to ask for a piece of the action. So I'd like you to bring you up there to comment.
Thank you very much for the interesting segue in, and I would like to also stand on existing protocol and congratulate the President and President-elect for an excellent session so far, a very rich session. Thank you very much for the lead-in. I think with the double shock that's happened and everything we've discussed, the very strong theme that's coming across and makes tremendous sense is that of collaboration. And it is in no way collaborative to say that anyone will come and try and pick the bones out of a changing direction in commodity prices. We absolutely must see this as the long-term gain and break behaviors of the past, which have been alluded to. Now, what does that mean? How would we achieve that? I think we've heard a lot from Seplat's CEO on Monday morning all the way through about horizontal collaboration within the operator space. That same opportunity exists within the supply levels as well. The ability to be it between an OEM and a digital and service company to share work in a manner that makes sense to ultimately take cost out, bring the operating costs down, as well alignment vertically. So what does that mean? That means service providers matching themselves with the workflows of the operators to again cut out waste and streamline the interfaces. I give you a practical example of that. In the past quarters, we Schlumberger have been reorganizing ourselves internally, moving from a status of having 17 individual product lines to 4 divisions now. And those 4 divisions were put together quite deliberately to match with an operator's own typical workflows: reservoir performance, production systems, well construction, with a digital and integration division laced across. So I think how does that help the operators? What does that mean? That means that as we communicate, as we come to discuss the challenges, the asset, the priorities for your assets, we're talking your language. And I think that's very, very important. A very interesting example was given by the executive director, Seplat, of the application of a technology, Periscope. The interesting thing about Periscope is it's typically sold in a sort of drilling and completion space, but actually the value comes from the data acquired about the asset, about the subsurface, and how that can be used to best exploit. So again, it's very much about, this is an example of better aligning from the supplier to the operator, can allow us to best design solutions that are going to really drive down the operating cost. I hope that answers the question.
Sure, thanks. Except I didn't quite hear you say, yes, we'll keep the prices flat at all times.
I can say definitively we're focused on bringing the operating costs down one way or another.
Okay, thanks for that. I just want to move on a bit slightly now to one of the statements that was made earlier about the need for us in Nigeria to produce the oil now. Given the direction the world is moving to, you don't want to have value stuck down at the subsurface a few years to come with nowhere to go. Given that there's a drive for gas, we have value today, but we have difficulty in raising money. So I'd like to direct this question to Pricewaterhouse, Mr. Kunle Lebute. Given the difficult times we are in today, given the urgency with which we need to still get value from the oil we have, how are we going to be able to raise the money for the investment to get the oil out now before it becomes unwanted commodity? Oh, my apologies, KPMG. Mr. Lebuchi.
Thank you very much. I wasn't going to answer you. Because I wasn't sure who you were calling, since I don't work for the company you mentioned.
Okay. I know that there isn't room for collaboration in that space.
No, there's collaboration, obviously. So thank you for answering your question. I think, at the end of the day, if you want to raise money from anybody, whether it's debt or equity, you've got to justify a return on investment, and that return on investment has to have a positive net present value, and it has to have an internal rate of return in either in dollars, because your industry is the dollar industry, at a benchmark rate which the provider of the capital believes is the right level of capital. Now, we all know that businesses have their ups and downs. Okay, it doesn't mean that if you raise money for a business today, that the business will make money all through. So some of the key parameters, which many companies still don't place value on, lenders in particular, and even investors, equity investors, one of the key things they look at is corporate governance. They want to be sure that the entity that they're giving money to has the adequate, proper corporate governance. And let me give you a very layman's definition of corporate governance. We ask ourselves, can the board fire the CEO, for example? If the board cannot fire the CEO, there's no corporate governance. That means that the board is full of the CEO's friends and chums from when they were in school. Okay, so first thing is, can the board fire the CEO? Second thing is that, is the financial reporting of the business transparent? Is it absolutely transparent? Do you release audited accounts on time, and so on and so forth? You get my point. And I think, do you have adequate controls? Do you have adequate controls? I mean, do you have a whistleblowing mechanism in the case somebody does something funny in the business? Can that person be reported? So lenders and investors do their due diligence, and they will actually give money to a company that has the things I have described, even if another company has a higher rate of return. They will give it to a company with a lower rate of return if they believe that the governance is much better. They believe that the company is run transparently, and that the company also has a system for reporting events. And of course, one last point is compliance with rules and regulations, compliance with laws and regulations. Compliance is critical. Compliance with money laundering rules, compliance with DPR regulations, compliance with the Petroleum Act, all the various things that you're meant to comply with. Now, so if they find a company does well on all those points, but has a lower rate of return and somebody that doesn't as well, they would prefer to give money to the one that has all those things with lower rate of return, because they're in it for the long term. So, just for that you have oil on the ground and you want to take it out of the ground, and you have what it takes to take it out of the ground, is not a pre-quid quo for anybody to give you money. Okay, there's much more than just giving you money. They're just having the technical capability and the team or the management team that can actually do. And then second, finally, of course, is that lenders like to give finance businesses that have a diversified shareholding, typically, because nobody can have overly influence decision making or overly influence the way things are run, particularly because there are many more shareholders, and therefore there's a balance of power in the ownership of the business. So these are my own thoughts based on my experience of many businesses that I've advised over the years in various sectors. And it doesn't matter what sector you are in. Money is fungible. It chases the things that will ensure that those who provide the capital will get the capital back.
Thank you very much. Thank you. For those of you who are online, please, if you wish to contribute to what's been discussed, any given question, by just raising your hand, I'll reach out to you. For those who are here with me, I can see their hands. The next question is going to go to two kinds of persons. A reasonably big player and a medium-sized player. I don't want to say a small player. These tough times we are in should ideally be leading to acquisitions and or mergers. I'd like to direct the first part to Victor Soje of New Cross. What is it in the times we are in the hard times we are in, that is preventing the mid-sized players in Nigeria today from exploring mergers, consolidations to make life easier for them?
All right, thank you, Nedu. Listening to the question, what is it that is hampering the mid-sized players from actually considering merger?
Yeah, by that I mean.
Merger has a lot of. Hello?
Go ahead. Go ahead, sorry.
Are you hearing me?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead, please.
Okay. Right. Okay. So merger has a lot of things to a lot of involvement, and of course you need to consider being able to be compatible. You can't just go into a merger in times like this because you need to consider the cost of that merger and acquisition. So what is the advantage of merging? And what do I stand to gain as we come together? There are a lot of costs. A lot of the medium people actually carry right now, a lot of costs. So you come with a lot of costs, and then are we going to share the cost? A lot of us who acquire assets, some around 2020, 2010, 2015, are actually carrying a lot of burden, and who is willing to come in and merge with you or acquire the liability. So liability is a major factor in considering merger at this time because of the huge cost that is playing. But in the case where the liabilities are low and everybody is actually trying to mind, they have paid off their debt, and we can have a level playing field, and people can come together. Decision may be much more easier at that time than when you are bringing a heavy debt. Nobody will be willing to actually merge with you or acquire that, because when they do your KYC and they see how much debt you are in, everybody will be scared. So that is what I really consider as a major factor that will hamper merger or acquisition at this time.
Okay, thanks.
So
what I think there is that there isn't sufficient appetite just yet, or perhaps the conditions are not sufficiently severe yet to make you swallow your pride and get into these difficult type of decisions. Before I go on to ask Gail Anderson for her comments from what I consider an international perspective, I'd like to go to first to a fairly big size player. Gail Anderson gave the example of the acquisition of Airland by Seplat as the only example in the past couple of years where you can talk about some kind of acquisition. So I'd like to direct this question to you, Effiong Okon. What is it? What are the kind of things that can happen that can enable a more rapid consolidation in this oil and gas space in Nigeria today, especially given the times we're in?
All right, thank you very much. Can you hear me? Is this still working?
Yes.
Okay. Chairman of this panel. So I think if you sort of reflection, I would say, so M&A has always been a big topic for everybody, and everyone is looking. I mean, Seplat, we're constantly evaluating opportunities all the time. But I think a few reflection to look at M&A lots of time actually erodes value. If you look at lots of big M&A globally, whether it's Air France, KLM, or whether it's GlaxoSmithKline, or whether you're looking at Daimler, Chrysler, a lot of these mergers and acquisition actually, for 80% of the time, tend to lead to huge value erosion. M&A is meant to harness synergies, to drive down cost and all that. But coming back to your point, I think every credible company needs to look at, you have to look at your portfolio and then look at your what's your strategy. And if you then look at all these M&A opportunity, whether it's asset acquisition or corporate acquisition, the question is, does it fit with your strategy? That's the number one question to ask yourself. Number two is around also, do you have the capability So if you're an onshore operator, you want to do an M&A with a deep water asset, for example, are you really ready, mature to really manage a deep water asset? Then the financial muscle, just like Mr. Kunle mentioned now, do you have the financial muscle to drive that? How good is your balance sheet? And then the bit around due diligence and counterparty risk as well comes critical. If you pull all that together, the point then becomes, at the end of the day, you're not just doing acquisition just for the fun of it. It's about profitable growth. So if you come back to respond to your question, what needs to happen is companies have to look at their portfolio. They have to scan the horizon and look at whether whatever comes up, fits with their strategy. Are they ready to really grow along those lines? Do you want to change your business model? If you look at Tullow today, we tend to look at ourselves amongst the likes of Tullow, Cosmo, Kind Energy. Tullow almost went under because Tullow moved from being a very successful exploration company, discovering unbelievable, huge finds, whether it's in Guyana or it's in Central Africa, the whole gas string of Mozambique, Kenya was all Tullow, even in Ghana with the Jubilee and 10 field. Then Tullow then went into production. I remember 4 or 5 years ago, we used to benchmark and said with Tullow was about $4 or $5 billion worth company. Today, Tullow almost went under. You all know all the fiasco around that. So I think companies need to step back and really ask themselves, why do you want to go into the M&A and what's the value proposition in there? Are you ready? Does it fit your strategy? So a lot of those kind of considerations are what you look at. But I strongly believe in what Gail did mention, that in the Nigerian setting, clearly, I'll say a few years from now, a lot of companies are going to disappear, whether I would like it or not. There's going to be new players emerging and evolving. And for me, those are going to be a trigger of what will happen to now drive the next wave of very successful companies. Chairman, that would be my own sort of reflection. But you need to have robust balance sheet to be ready to strike. You must have the right organization capacity. You must have, like Kunle said, good board, corporate governance, so that investors can actually trust you, that you're credible and they'll put money in your business and they will also recover their investment and you're delivering value for shareholder on the medium to long term. There was a good article in Financial Times and Nigeria is actually a place to lose money. It's if you go read it, it's not really been a good experience. We can talk about all the disastrous investment here. So it makes investors a bit edgy when it comes to investing. Each time we go to London, so we're listed in London, and each time we talk to investors, they always tend to look at all investors, how people have lost money in Nigeria. So it's not a very easy battle. But I do believe that we still have very, very attractive opportunities, and therefore, in the medium to long term, it's only companies who can really stand the test of the waters that can attract investors. Thank you.
Thanks, Effie. Not that I agree that Nigeria is a place to lose money. I'd like to invite Gail to have her perspective on this.
Yeah, some very good points that have been made, in terms of, barriers to doing sort of M&A, and also, some perfectly good reasons to do it. I mean, obviously, the CPLAT Eland deal made sense, because CPLAT's Western Delta assets were maturing for oil production. Taking on Eland's OML 40 made a lot of sense because there was a lot of growth there. So, you've got to have kind of clear strategic drivers. Balance sheet strength clearly is an essential, and many companies don't have that. So we might see new entrants in Nigeria. I would also mention as well, like in my presentation, I commented on the lack of kind of joint developments, even in the Niger Delta. So we're not even talking M&A here. We're just talking about working together. There's lots of kind of straddling fields that kind of haven't been developed for many years for one reason or another. CPLAT's ANOH development is interesting because, of course, it's a straddling field. And I think originally there were hopes that that would be developed kind of as one joint project. But now we've got CPLAT doing its thing, we've got Shell doing its thing, and there is some kind of collaboration, but it's not quite panned out as collaboratively as we hoped for. So certainly I kind of feel like there should be a bit more sharing of resources and sort of projects in terms of unitized developments that could save money. And I don't think there's quite been that sort of level of cooperation that would deliver cost savings. So I think that's something that could be improved, definitely.
Okay, thanks a lot for that. Many of us are aware that in Nigeria today, we are awaiting the outcome of the marginal fields build round. That's an opportunity, hopefully, for also giving some injection to the oil and gas industry in Nigeria. I'm going to throw this question open, and whosoever wants to take it up is please welcome. Where will the money come from that will enable these marginal field winners to develop the resources that the original owners did not develop because of their lack of competitiveness? Any taker? Sure.
I can add a comment, and maybe it's not directly on the financing or the source of cash, but perhaps how, as an industry, we can de-risk that investment through the adoption of technology. And I'm here really particularly talking about digital technology. So as we've had things like the marginal field bid round, how can we make that a richer, more thorough experience process, whereby the results, i.e. the bids that come out, are done from a lower risk perspective, so i.e. more attractive for financiers. And digital technology is really a disruptor that I think this is an excellent example of how it's breaking new ground in Nigeria. You can imagine previous bid rounds where potential bidders have to travel to visit physical data rooms, mine through data on site, whereas now this is all being done remotely. Also with just the general prevalence of digital tools, artificial intelligence, we are better able to, and we've already heard a lot about digital twins through this, but better able to interrogate data and hence come with more well-founded, I would say, and again, lower risk recommendations. So again, not directly talking about the financing, but how we can perhaps de-risk the financing decision, and the virtual margin field bid round data room was a good example of that.
Thank you. I'll just move online now and ask one or two questions. But before I take that, I understand, Effie, you have a comment.
I think that's a very good point you raised. So the way we see this is for the marginal field. I mean, it depends on, there's some marginal fields that have low complexity and therefore adjacent to existing operators. I think where that does occur and you have very good synergies, it comes back to the point around collaboration. So if you have a marginal field that's not too far from an existing infrastructure, then I can imagine that operator can actually synergize with the winner to then see how they can finance and develop those assets. And for us in Seplat, I know a number of small companies have actually come for non-binding MOU to say if they are successful and there's some bit of a fit with our strategy, then we can leverage on our own sort of, will I say, opportunity to develop those. I don't think it's going to be too much challenge. What's important is the asset is attractive. If you look at it end to end, it does deliver value. Then you can then leverage on either existing operators or even off-takers. There's quite a lot of, in my view, a lot of finance actually available globally now, chasing very few opportunities. The only issue is it's got to be robust. It's got to have credible people behind it. You got to have a good corporate governance around that organization. There's integrity, and you can then unlock value. Those were my own sort of reflections. Thanks.
Thank you. I'd like to move online and just read out some of the questions that have come in. This one is from Olushaye Ekun. I must ask this one because he's the chief organizer, even though he's not physically here. It says, our industry is a cyclical one, boom and bust. Notwithstanding, each time there is a fall in commodity price, the industry players typically go into reactive mode, stopping exploration programs, training staff rationalization, etc. How can industry right size for sustainability in both low and high price period instead of shutting down exploration programs now and then? In other words, how do you smoothen this curve of rise and fall, given that the externalities in the main control these? Any taker? Yes, Chief Jim Orife. Olorogun.
Sound.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. I think we should realize that the industry is not going to just go away in 10 years' time. I must know that no cycle of downturn has ever lasted in the stretch of 5 years. We've had this thing so many times, over and over and over again. So we should use that. Actually, if I were owning a company, it's the downturn that I will explore. Everything is cheaper. It's the downturn that I will train my staff because they are available. All the things that should actually bring you to the next upturn should be done when the prices are low, because when the upturn comes, you will be ready to take advantage of it when others are just lying there for 2 or 3 years. That is the beauty of the downturn. It's only those who can appreciate and take advantage of it that will be there to reap what I call huge benefits when the next upturn comes. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. That presupposes that you have a huge cash reserves, or you can access capital rather rapidly. Next question. In a sustained sub $40 a barrel, how do we ensure growth in the industry? Or better still, what are the requisite levers necessary to ensure growth? Any taker?
Okay, maybe I can attempt this one.
Okay, Chika, go ahead, please.
All right. There are a couple of things that come to mind when we keep talking about the low oil price environment and how we can make sure that we're resilient. And I keep saying, I'll repeat myself, that it's about long-term planning. You plan these assets for a life cycle and you introduce into that the uncertainty in the oil price that will vary. Now, in a number of examples, you can look at businesses that are not so integrated into your portfolio, other businesses that either will thrive when the oil price is low, and so those can shore up your upstream E&P business. And a couple of examples are if gas prices are going to stay stable. I keep warning about the fact that putting gas in the portfolio is fine now, but we need to watch that space. So if gas, for example, what has been mentioned by for Seplat, if that business will still be profitable, keeping it local and regional and not allowing international gas prices to affect it, then that actually shows up whenever there's a low oil price. The other part that does that is, again, we use the word vertical integration, is to have a refining business, because I can go into a little more detail about how that refining business helps to shore this up, modular refineries, which is what Walter Smith is doing. Because when the oil price is lower, and with the kind of model that we have, we find out that with the lower oil prices, with the right proportions of export and refined crude, you can take advantage of the refinery margins to keep your business going. When the oil price goes up, of course, the refinery will suffer a little bit more, but your E&P upstream business, if you keep the cost manageable, will gain from that. So you have that kind of balanced portfolio. So you can do it in a number of ways. So it's just to make sure it's long-term and make sure that you have a balanced portfolio that allows you to thrive both in a high oil price environment and a low oil price environment. Thank you.
Thank you, Chike. Before I bring this to a close, there's one question here which I very much would like to read out, although I followed it in the presentation, but I think it's well worth having the presenter re-explain for the benefit of others. And the question is, what are the factors controlling the definition and or classification of advantaged oil versus disadvantaged oil? I think it was Gail that had that in her presentation.
So could you just repeat the question? What were the factors?
What are the factors controlling the definition and or classification of advantaged oil versus disadvantaged oil? Remember the graph you showed?
Yes, sure. So, so for advantaged oil and gas, we were talking about obviously having low costs as being one of kind of the key factors in that. Low emissions is another key factor. That's obviously critical in Nigeria when you've got a lot of mature oil fields, and there's flaring still going on at over 170 flare sites. And I highlighted the fact that, Nigeria has got a lot in its favor, good quality crude, which finds a market usually. Obviously, this year was an exceptional year. There was floating cargoes around the coast, but generally speaking, the market is excellent. Government share is a really critical aspect here, and this is where the PIB will come in. Obviously, we're very keen to see how it progresses and what it delivers, but potentially the headline royalty and tax rates are reducing, and that will help to improve advantage for upstream assets. And then, of course, there's the above ground risks, which is a challenge clearly, and that's why we kind of talk about the need to develop those shallow water assets in particular, and of course in deep water. But the subsurface, which is another factor, is excellent in Nigeria. So there's a lot in its favor. I think that there's just so much that the government could do to help make the other areas, the weaknesses, if you like, that I've identified better. And I think that's critical. I think Nigeria needs to kind of keep going with its reforms, and deliver changes which will really unlock that potential for advantage barrels, because it's got a huge opportunity right now, because the sort of upstream industry is changing. Gas is a transition fuel. This is the moment to seize and move ahead with reforms to liberalize the market and because the market is, that's in the government's policy. It believes in free markets. Let's see the evidence. Let's go for it. And I'm sure that if it kind of liberalized the markets for gas, for example, it could have a real multiplier effect in the wider economy. And I think Nigeria's kind of just waiting for that to happen. I expect to see big growth in gas development in the country if that was enabled. So I think the ball's in the government's court. There's plenty to do. There's huge resources. There's so much potential advantage. Let's make it happen.
Thank you, Gail. Thank you very much. Is there any one of us with a burning statement to make for less than 10 seconds?
I think our opportunity, we need to keep in mind the concept of lean to grow, as whether it's high or low oil price. Our challenge as a community oil and gas industry is to continue to take the cost out, and this is our route to growth. That's my final thought.
Thank you. I'd like to thank Kunle Lebute, Daryl Walker, Effie Okon, Chike Nwosu, Victor Soje, and Gail Anderson for their contributions. And thanks to NAPE for organizing this. Mr. President, thank you very much. And thank you as well, Richmond. I'd like to bring it to a close here. Thank you.
Just remain seated for 1 minute. Madam President-elect, please, if you can just come do the final vote of thanks and just go. You want to stand here? Okay, that's fine.
Okay. Gentlemen, and everybody who participated online, Gail, Chike, Kunle Lebute, Total, and Shell. I want to say a very big thank you to you all for believing in NAPE, for believing in our ability to deliver this virtual conference, being the first time ever we are doing this to an outstanding success. I especially want to thank our moderator for the day, panel chairman for the day, Mr. Nedo Sanyande. He flew in all the way from Port Harcourt just to make this happen, to be live in the NAPE studio, which we appreciate you. Thank you, everyone. This has been an exciting ride, a very beautiful experience. I can't wait to see what the coming years are going to bring forth, considering all the leverages and all the learnings that we are taking from the opportunities we are seeing in the COVID era. Thank you. Have a good day.
So just one last assignment. Gentlemen, if you can just come down, take a picture with the President, Mr. President, sir. So, well, ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. We've come to the end of the management session for 2020. The NAPE conference continues, albeit everything is still happening virtually. There would be another small coming together like this on Thursday night for the awards ceremony. And tonight, okay, thank you, sir. Tonight, when you know, it's virtual African night party. So see you all. Bye-bye. Richmond is the name. Enjoy.